the Sergeant at Arms will kindly assist you. Thank you very much for your kind cooperation. Chair, we're ready to begin.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Parks and Recreations Committee's hearing in the New York City Council on the fiscal 2026 preliminary budget and the preliminary mayor's management report for the Department of Parks and Recreation. My name is Shekhar Krishnan, and I am the chair of the Parks and Recreation Committee. I would like to acknowledge my fellow council members who are present here today: Councilmember Marte, Councilmember Carr, Councilmember Brewer, and I know others will be joining as well. Today, we will be hearing from the Department of Parks and Recreation on its fiscal 2026 preliminary budget, which totals $640.4 million. While it is an increase of about $22.4 million since adoption, this is still nowhere near the budget that the Parks Department of New York City deserves. It is nowhere near the goal of $1 billion that Mayor Adams campaigned on 4 years ago and has consistently broken that promise. And it is nowhere near what other cities, large cities across America, devote to their parks budget every year. If we want to be serious about investing in the well-being of New Yorkers, if we want to be serious about investing in New Yorkers' public health as well as mental health, then we need to take the steps towards improving our parks, making them safer and cleaner. And you do that by investing in them, not by cutting their budget. Now, there are still major gaps in the department's funding, specifically with regard to urban park rangers, PEP officers, and natural areas funding. Let's look at this very clearly. If we want our parks to be safe, if we want them to be clean, if we want to across our city, then we need to invest in our parks workers and the areas of the budget that care for these things. The urban park rangers, the PEP officers, and our forestry funding capture perfectly the fact that we need to do far more to invest in those areas of the department to make our parks safer, cleaner, and greener. But as of January, the reality is that we do not have enough staff to cover the entire 30,000 acres of New York City parks. As of January, there were less than 300 PEP officers covering all the parks across New York City. Nowhere near the headcount that is needed to provide protection for park goers and keep our parks safe. Additionally, we have been fighting for urban park rangers to receive permanent funding so that 50 city employees don't have to worry about potentially losing their job every year. We have seen on the federal level the way in which the budget of the National Park Service is being decimated and the impact that has had on our rangers on the federal level. Here in New York City, we are still fighting to protect our parks budget. Our urban park rangers, 50 of them every year, are relying on the city council to fund them from year to year. That is unacceptable. Supporting our parks workers not only ensures our parks are taken care of, but investing in these workers and their jobs ensures that they can provide for their family, pay their rent or mortgage, and pay for childcare. And that can only happen if and when this mayor joins the city council in investing in workers and their jobs. If it were up to this city council alone, their jobs and many more would no longer be at the discretion of yearly budget negotiations. That is not the way to run a budget, an agency's budget in New York City. We need good paying, stable jobs for New Yorkers. Working in our Parks Department can provide that path, so long as we invest in those jobs. And these temporary one-year allocations of funding or one-shots are no way to sustain good-paying, stable jobs. It is no way to show our investment and gratitude for the parks workers who care for our green spaces every single day of the year, rain, shine, or in the snow. What I hope to show throughout this budget hearing is that our parks are severely underfunded. And year after year, we are here highlighting how essential our parks are to the well-being of our city, to the livability of our city, and yet we are battling cuts from this city hall in budget after budget that we are fighting to replace. We are heading in a direction that scares me and my constituents and should scare all New Yorkers. If we care about our city and its well-being, if we want to make sure every community in New York City thrives, then we need to prioritize our Parks Department and its budget. The fiscal 2026 preliminary budget includes $23.5 million in new needs for FY 2026, $173,000 other adjustments, and thankfully, no pegs. But I will say again, we cannot be operating from this mindset of scarcity, where we are here reflecting on the fact that we don't have cuts, where every budget fight we engage in is finding ways to replace cuts. We are not moving forward. We are actually moving backwards. And so while there are no cuts to the department this year, the fact is the gigantic cuts over the prior years have set this department back and in the work it is able to do for our green spaces across the city. And that is no way our city should be managed or run. Now, there are several new needs we fought for last year, as well as an expansion of the swim safety program, which will improve our children's ability to safely use our beaches and pools. There is also funding for the Shirley Chisholm Park positions, as well as tree bed rat mitigation. The committee looks forward to hearing testimony about the FY 2026 preliminary plan, and in these areas in particular, second shift program, lifeguards, and most fundamentally, the headcount of workers in the Parks Department. Before we begin with the testimony, I would like to thank council staff for their hard work, our finance team of Chima Obisher, Jack Story, and Michael Sherman, our committee staff, Christopher Sartori and Patrick Mulvihill, and my own staff, Greg and Chanel Martinez. I will now ask the committee council, well, before doing so, I also want to acknowledge that we have several other council members join us as well, Councilmember Julie Menon and Councilmember Linda Lee. And I will now ask the committee council to go over some procedural items and swear in the representatives from the Parks Department.
Good afternoon. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and position for the record when you begin, and you may begin when you're ready. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Krishnan and members of the Parks Committee and other members of the Council, and importantly, happy first day of spring. My name is Sue Donahue, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. I'm pleased to be here today to testify regarding the agency's fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget, and I am also pleased to be joined by several members of my incredible agency senior staff leadership with me today. New York City Parks plans, maintains, and cares for over 30,000 acres of green and open space, encompassing 5,000 individual properties, ranging from playgrounds and beaches to community gardens and natural areas, and over 5.7 million trees. We provide tens of thousands of recreational and educational public programs throughout the year, including free classes and programs offered in our recreation centers. Shape Up NYC fitness classes hosted in locations all over the city, Kids in Motion children's programming in our playgrounds, led by our playground associates, and nature walks and other educational programs provided by our urban park rangers in our parks, natural areas, and our nature centers. I want to thank the Council for its continued support of our city's open spaces over the past year and for championing the importance of parks for all New Yorkers. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to discuss the agency's preliminary budget and to provide an overview of our efforts over the past year to continue delivering on our mission to build and maintain a restorative and thriving park system. Parks are essential and touch every facet of our daily lives. Just as we invest in better roads and sewers, we must invest in our parks to help safeguard our city's present and future. Unlike other forms of urban infrastructure, parks evolve and change over time, but their importance to New Yorkers remains consistent. Our parks need to be clean and safe, green and resilient, and supported by engaged and empowered New Yorkers. By creating clean and safe public spaces, we can make our communities more secure, providing young people with accessible outlets for fun and active play, while giving neighbors places to connect, swap stories, and build community. With green and resilient spaces, New Yorkers can experience all the health benefits, both mental and physical, of time out in the great outdoors, and our city will be better prepared to withstand the challenges of climate change. And by engaging New Yorkers in the care of our shared green spaces, we can strengthen our civic community, counteract the loneliness crisis, and empower people of all backgrounds to advocate for the resources they need. With all this in mind, in June of 2024, we released Vital Parks for All, investing in New York City's living infrastructure, the agency's $3.2 billion plan to improve existing park facilities, equitably deliver new resources to underserved communities, and equip New Yorkers with the information they need to better enjoy, celebrate, and support their parks. Through this plan, we are undertaking ambitious initiatives, expanding bathroom access, upgrading our citywide network of public pools, expanding our tree canopy, growing our greenways, promoting public safety, empowering grassroots action, and expanding recreation center access. In conjunction with the plan, Explorer, a digital map available on our agency website that empowers New Yorkers with information regarding how their neighborhood compares to the citywide average on critical components of a vital park system, including dog runs, greenways, volunteer groups, park rule enforcement, and more. Additionally, New Yorkers can get information about their local park's vital signs, including a park condition score, recent investment, upcoming events, and volunteer opportunities. This data can help New Yorkers better understand and appreciate the open space resources they have and better advocate for what they need. We have been introducing New Yorkers to this new strategic framework and these new tools through various public events and briefings, and we welcome the Council's partnership in helping New Yorkers learn more about their park system. We're focusing on keeping New Yorkers engaged and informed because it's so important to sustaining our park system. In 2024, we celebrated getting a record number of volunteers involved in their local parks through our Let's Green NYC initiative. Since the start of the campaign in 2023, we have engaged nearly 850,000 New Yorkers, volunteers in park stewardship and engagement activities. This ambitious effort to encourage New Yorkers to participate more deeply in the care of our shared green spaces also included an inventive online directory to help New Yorkers find the volunteer opportunities that best align with their interests, channeling their enthusiasm and their energy in the most productive direction. Fostering and shepherding New York's love for parks requires hard work and dedication from every corner of our agency, but especially the staff leading Partnership for Parks, our unique public-private partnership with City Parks Foundation, which is our primary mechanism to support and champion neighborhood park volunteers by giving them the tools they need to advocate and care for their neighborhood parks and green spaces in a dedicated, sustained way. From planting a record number of trees along our city streets to launching the biggest investment in our public pools in decades, 2024 was a milestone year for our city's living infrastructure. I'm extremely grateful to all of the park's employees, volunteers, and partners who have helped make our city greener, safer, and more livable in the past year. So I'd like to briefly mention a few of our highlights and successes. Despite a persistent lifeguard shortage that has affected municipalities across the country, we were able to safely welcome more than 8 million visitors to our beaches and pools during the 2024 season. This was made possible thanks to our dedicated and focused efforts to increase lifeguard recruitment, which resulted in a 43% increase in new recruits over the 2023 beach season. In addition to an extensive lifeguard recruitment campaign, the city reached a new agreement with DC 37, enabling closer collaboration and improvements to our lifeguard recruitment and training processes. And we're building on that foundation as we are already well into our lifeguard recruitment drive for the 2025 beach and pool season. To expand New Yorkers' access to swim safety skills and vital relief from the heat, we also launched Let's Swim NYC, a capital investment of more than $1 billion for building, improving, and protecting New York City's public pools over the course of 5 years, the largest investment in swim infrastructure since the 1970s. We are also well into construction on the $92 million Mary Callie Dalton Recreation Center on Staten Island and the $141 million Shirley Chisholm Recreation Center in Brooklyn, both of which are utilizing an innovative design-build approach led by our sister agency colleagues at DDC. Last November, the design for a new $90 million recreation center at Walter Gladwin Park in the Bronx was the recipient of an award for excellence in design from the Public Design Commission. And we're very excited to see that incredible project moving forward. As part of the fiscal year 2025 budget adopted last June, the administration also dedicated $160 million to completely rebuild the beloved Brownsville Recreation Center, which had fallen in. Proud to join our agency partners in announcing the administrative's creative and bold vision for transforming an underutilized site in Manhattan's Hudson Square neighborhood into a vibrant, community-focused, mixed-use development, which will include a multi-floor recreation center to provide year-round recreation, health, and wellness opportunities for community members of all ages and abilities. Beyond expanding recreation access to New Yorkers through brand new state-of-the-art facilities, these projects represent hundreds of millions of dollars in major investments in public health and safety, providing safe and affordable spaces and strengthening community bonds. We also help New Yorkers enjoy our green spaces more comfortably with investments in our public amenities, making sure no one has to cut their time in a park short just because nature is calling. In 2024, we installed new baby changing tables in over 1,200 park restrooms across the city, providing a vital amenity for parents looking to keep their little ones happy and healthy. And it's not just kids and parents who are getting relief. Together with our partners across the administration, we launched an ambitious initiative to build new restrooms and renovate existing restrooms throughout the 5 boroughs, some of which are utilizing creative modular designs to help us provide public restrooms faster and at a lower cost. As stewards of our city's natural resources, we work year-round to keep the 5 boroughs' diverse ecosystems healthy and thriving, from our wild natural areas and forests to the urban tree canopy along our city streets. In the face of extreme heat, the environmental benefits of tree cover have never been so evident. In 2024, we planted nearly 18,000 new trees along streets and in landscaped areas of parks, the most since fiscal year 2016, and with a special focus on neighborhoods impacted by high heat vulnerability. To continue that momentum in a more efficient and strategic manner, we have unveiled the Neighborhood Tree Planting Program, a new planting strategy that will help us plant even more trees and further expand our focus on equity by prioritizing the most vulnerable neighborhoods. Over the next decade, through this new block planting strategy, baseline capital funds are in place for the agency to ensure that every viable and appropriate location for hosting a street tree gets inspected and planted, along with other tree-related streetscape improvements. Turning to the specific topic for this hearing, the fiscal year 2026 preliminary expense operating budget for NYC Parks is $640 million. A $22 million increase over the agency's fiscal year 2025 annual budget. This financial plan demonstrates the administration's ongoing commitment to promoting equitable investments in a greener, healthier city and giving our agency the resources we need to continue getting the job done, delivering core services and keeping our city parks clean and safe. The plan includes $5 million in new baseline funding for aquatics and lifeguard staff, allowing us to partner with NYC schools to expand our existing Swim for Life and Learn to Swim programs at school pools, so that more children can learn water safety and swimming skills to keep them safe. We're also receiving $1 million in new dedicated funding for rat mitigation in street tree beds. This is another important step forward in this administration's effort to clean up the city and reduce the presence of rodents, alongside the unveiling of creative new parks trash receptacles designed specifically for pizza boxes, limiting the food available to rodents, as well as a $2 million investment last November, which will allow our agency to containerize our curbside trash collection with over 9,000 lockable street trash bins. We're also excited to be expanding our second shift evening and weekend park maintenance strategy with over $12 million in new baseline funding for staff to clean 100 additional busy park hotspots when they're being most heavily used. This builds upon the initial wave of second shift maintenance funding provided in the most recent fiscal year 2025 adopted budget, which will provide weekend and evening coverage at a total of 200 separate locations in 121 of our busiest parks. We're in the process of recruiting and interviewing these new hires and are aiming for full deployment by mid-April as the weather begins to warm and our busiest season gets underway. The agency has a 10-year capital plan of over $10 billion, representing $424 million in new capital for projects, including the reconstruction of the iconic Passerelle pedestrian bridge in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, which serves as a primary entrance into the park for countless visitors every year, as well as close to a dozen incredible park investments across the city that were included last year as part of this administration's landmark City of Yes Housing and Economic Opportunity Initiative. Our Capital Division staff works tirelessly, advancing hundreds of projects, many of which were made possible with generous discretionary funding from this council to build and improve our parks and playgrounds in a timely and efficient manner. We pride ourselves on our creative designs, which are shaped by public input so that these spaces can best serve the local community. This design approach is a cornerstone for the capital projects being advanced through the Community Parks Initiative, our signature equity-driven investment program through which Parks enhances green spaces in underserved neighborhoods. Through this initiative, we are both using data-driven methodology and working with communities to create thriving public spaces. Over the past decade, we have reimagined parks and have another 40 projects actively underway. Over $500 million of capital funding for rebuilding parks and playgrounds that haven't seen significant investment in decades. Through a partnership with the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health, we have assessed the positive health and social impacts of CPI, and this study has been extended to research the impact of local programming and activation in our CPI parks on quality of life and well-being, so that we can best understand how quality parks can benefit everyone in our communities. We'll be making some exciting new CPI project announcements in the near future, so stay tuned, and we look forward to inviting you to many more community input meetings, groundbreakings, and ribbon cuttings as these projects progress. In closing, I want to thank my entire team at the Parks Department for their continued hard work and dedication to our mission. I'm honored and grateful to be able to lead this agency. I also want to thank the Council for the opportunity to work with each of you to continue improving our parks and open spaces for all New Yorkers. We look forward to continuing our close partnership with the Council to create a bright, green future with a more equitable, inclusive, and resilient park system. We'd now be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner, for your testimony and for your leadership with the Parks Department. I also, before we get started, I also want to just recognize that we've been joined also by Councilmember Ung and Councilmember Holden virtually. And I also want to thank our committee counsel for today, Natasha Bynum, for your great work as well. And Councilmember Aviles has also joined us as well. So for this hearing, because we have a number of members here too, I'm going to ask, and Councilmember Ressler is walking in right now too. Late, but still here. Sure. You know, because the number of council members here too, what I'll do is I'll ask a couple categories of questions and then turn it over to my colleagues, and then I'll come back for more of my questions and keep going back and forth like that. So just taking a step back, Commissioner, we've every year had to unfortunately do this budget dance battle with City Hall, as I mentioned before, not over investments, but over cuts, and then reversing those cuts. And every year, we're going through that cycle and making no progress. And if anything, we've slid backwards than moved forward. Zooming out, we know that there are no cuts in this plan, but there are also no restorations to the disastrous and damaging cuts that we have seen over the last several years to the Parks Department. And there are no proposals to reverse the profound and harmful impact those cuts have had on this agency. We've seen hundreds of positions reduced, many programs delayed or outright eliminated as, quote, cost-saving measures, but we know and that has undoubtedly impacted our green space, our workers, and the city's ability to care for them. Looking back over the last several years, Isn't it true that in total the Parks Department has lost about 700 positions, give or take, because of these cuts?
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question, and it is implemented both in November 23 and that financial plan and the January 24 financial plan. It was necessary to reduce existing vacant year-round positions as well as future vacancies that will be created through attrition. So the agency remains in a hiring slowdown, and yes, after the agency fulfills its savings targets, the total PEG will amount to roughly the 700 positions you mentioned. But we are pleased to note, as you said at the beginning, the new FY26 preliminary budget does include significant baseline headcount increases for specific agency efforts, second shift expansion, swim safety, staffing for the soon-to-be-open Shirley Chisholm Rec Center. So important adds to areas that are helpful for the agency.
Understood, but as you recognize too, we are still 700 positions short. And in fact, if you go back to the FY23 preliminary plan, I'm just going to briefly read here: 250 positions cut in the FY23 preliminary plan, 200 positions cut in the FY23 November plan, 118 positions cut in the FY24 November plan, 375 positions cut in the FY25 preliminary plan. Cuts after cuts after cuts. However, whatever metric you look at it by, that's well more than 700, but however you look at it, we have seen the agency's positions being reduced tremendously. On top of that, for years now, the agency has been subject to a 2-for-1 hiring freeze, which means that you all cannot hire one worker unless two leave the department. Is that correct?
It's true, Councilmember, that there's a 2-for-1 citywide hiring freeze is in place for many agencies, including parks, as the city continues to deal with economic constraints. However, many positions related to public safety or similar needs are exempt from this broader hiring restriction. But the 2-for-1 hiring restriction is not particularly impactful for parks, as we're already subject to PEG saving targets from expected attrition. So the agency will remain kind of in a hiring slowdown. So it's not just the 2-for-1, it's more meeting the PEG attrition targets. But as I said, there are importantly certain positions that are exempt from that: PEP, recreation, engineers that are exempt from that.
But the vast majority of positions in parks are still subject to the hiring freeze, right?
It's not so much yes, it's the hiring freeze in addition to our PEG target that we have to meet that is really about savings through attrition. So when people leave, not being able to hire them.
So 700 positions lost, the inability to hire for many of those positions, and the impact on the headcount as a result, the impact on the hiring of workers has been drastic. Have you had conversations with OMB about both the cuts, the loss of positions, as well as the hiring freeze, and what have those conversations been like?
At this time of year, as you well know, Council Member, as the budget process moves forward, we're in continuous conversations with OMB and the Mayor's office regarding our PEG savings targets and new needs. And that is an ongoing conversation and will be ongoing over the next few months. And I am incredibly proud of our dedicated workers and our agency staff who, as you mentioned, are out there every day delivering on our mission to take care of the Parks Department.
But what have been the substance of those conversations with OMB about filling the 700 positions lost, lifting the hiring freeze on parks workers? What is the substance of those conversations been with the budget office for City Hall?
It is continuous back and forth in conversations about new needs that we've put forward and areas where we're seeing challenges, and just ongoing conversations, as is always the case at this time of year.
So in fiscal year 2024, what was the budgeted and actual headcount for full-time employees versus seasonal employees?
So in FY24, the total budgeted agency headcount for full-time employees was 4,755, and the budgeted headcount for seasonal full-time equivalents was 3,288.
And Commissioner, I'm just going to ask, do you believe that that is a sufficient amount of resources to run the Parks Department of New York City?
As I said, I'm really proud of our staff, and they do the best job they can with the resources they have available.
Well, I fail to see how it's an adequate amount of resources to support the staff that I no doubt are working extremely hard. But with a hiring freeze in place and hundreds of positions lost, and many seasonal positions and not enough permanent lines, I fail to see how you all have the resources you need from this mayor to do the job that you're supposed to do for our 30,000 acres of park space across New York City.
I do want to point out, Council Member, that our seasonal plan of 5,000 seasonal employees is not subject to a 2-for-1 hiring freeze. So we do bring on, at this time of year in mid-April, extensive seasonal park staff to help us in the busiest time of year.
Understood. Thank you. Before turning it over to my colleagues, I want to shift to another topic that's been the subject of much public discussion and attention recently. On November 3rd, the Parks Department issued an RFP for the management of the Wollman Rink in Central Park. This was after the department turned down an offer by the Central Park Conservancy to replace the rink and provide additional improvements to the park with the largest private gift in its history. The RFP is now being pursued by the Trump Organization. While the Trump Organization managed the Wollman Rink for years, they were stripped of the privilege following the events of January 6th. Commissioner, can you please provide a breakdown of the offer made by the Central Park Conservancy? Why was it rejected? What part of the operations would be funded by private donations and what part by city dollars?
Thank you, Council Member, and I appreciate the question. I want to start off by recognizing that, of course, the Central Park Conservancy is a really important partner of ours for over 40 years in the care and maintenance of Central Park, and we so appreciate their ongoing work and their incredible partnership in Central Park. In terms of Wollman Rink, for over 30 years, the concession at Wollman Rink has been awarded via an open, competitive RFP process. We feel like that is very important to continue to do it in that manner. Like any entity, the Central Park Conservancy was eligible to submit a proposal in response to our RFP, nothing would preclude CPC from making improvements around Wollman Rink, but we really felt it was important to put that out to competitive bid, as it has been, for years and years in the past.
But the Central Park Conservancy was offering $120 million, which, to paraphrase the letter from the Conservancy to the Parks Department to City Hall, they are not a corporation seeking to extract money from the government, but a nonprofit partner looking to give money to the city. In fact, the largest gift ever in its history of $120 million, requiring also 30 million contributions from city government. But $120 million far outweighs the amount the city would have to put in. Yeah. Why was that offer rejected?
I can comment on, the proposed amount that they were going to contribute, but I do know that it would have also required an investment from the city, absolutely. Just as with the Harlemere project, the city invested $60 million in that project, and so the offer, I wouldn't say was rejected. We encouraged them to bid like everyone else because this was going to go through a competitive bidding process. We felt that was the fairest way to do it.
And why was the decision made to implement an RFP, competitive bidding process here?
I'm sorry?
Why was the decision made to issue an RFP and a competitive bidding process in this situation?
Because that was the manner that this has been bid out for years and years in the past, and we felt that a competitive public bidding process was the right way to go here. And
when was that competitive bidding process announced?
I believe it was in September of last year.
Or was it in November? Do you have the exact time when it was introduced, when it was announced?
We can absolutely get you the exact timing of it. Yes, absolutely.
So that was the reason to do a competitive RFP. But isn't it a fact that Harlemere which is a part of Central Park, just a bit away from Wollman Rink, was not put to a competitive bidding process, but was instead given over to Central Park with the same arrangement. They provided funding, the city put in funding for Harlem Mirror. Isn't that the case? That was done by a sole source or not competitive bidding process.
Yeah, those are very different concessions, council member. Very different revenue generating opportunities, very different concessions. Central Park Authority hadn't run a concession before like that, and so we wanted to give them an opportunity to run a concession. The Wollman Rink is obviously a much more lucrative, high profile. We felt that it was important to go through a public bidding process because of the difference in nature of those concessions and the revenue from those concessions.
How much revenue did the Wollman Rink accrue for the city in FY23 and FY24?
I have that. In FY23, Wollman Rink paid more than $3.1 million in license fees to the city. In FY24, Wollman Rink paid more than $3.2 million in license fees to the city. And it experienced nearly 300,000 admissions for 24-25 ice skating season. And importantly, 11% of those admissions, nearly 30,000, were either free or discounted. By comparison, Councilmember, you asked, FY20 comparison, Wollman Rink versus Lasker. Wollman in FY20 had 17 million in gross receipts. Lasker Rink had 1.3 million in gross receipts. So very different entities for sure.
And do you have the date that the RFP was put up? I have here as reported in the city and other public media. The RFP was announced, put up a request for proposals for Wollman Rink on November 17th. Is that correct?
As stated, we're absolutely happy to get back to you at that date.
Assuming it was November 17th as reported, that was a matter of days after the United States presidential election. Is that correct?
It absolutely is. But when we put out a request for proposal is based on that agreement ending, which is in 2026, and having enough time to go through the negotiation process.
And prior to putting it out, when was the last time you all had a conversation with the Central Park Conservancy about its gift of $120 million?
You know, we have regular conversations with the Central Park Conservancy. As I said, they're an important partner of ours. We talk to them all the time.
I would be good to know for this committee too, just to break down in the timeline of understanding when the RFP was issued. I know as well, Central Park Conservancy had issued a letter to you all too, stating their intention to provide the gift as well and work with the Parks Department. Just the process of when those meetings happened, when was the last meeting in relation to when the RFP was announced would be helpful.
Absolutely, and we're happy, Council Member, to get you that timeline, and we'll provide that afterwards. Just to note that if the RFP was released November 17th, elected and council members were notified 30 days prior to that in October of that RFP going out. So we can get you that timeline as well.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
My next question is, has the Trump organization made a formal offer to the Parks Department regarding the RFP? And if so, can you please provide a breakdown of the offer, private dollars versus public dollars?
I'm unable to comment on this topic. In accordance with FCRC rules, the city does not comment on any ongoing solicitation or vendor proposal. But before finalizing any award, the city will consider multiple factors, including the vendor's financial resources, their record of business integrity. But at this time, I can't comment on any specific proposals we've received.
And how about the number of bids that you've all have received for this
also
project?
Cannot comment. It's an ongoing negotiation.
And my final question is, you are, in the Parks Department and City Hall, are aware that the Trump organization has been convicted of 17 counts of criminal tax fraud and falsifying business records.
We are aware, yes.
Thank you. I'll now turn over to my colleague for some questions before going back to more questions. Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you very much. Central Park is in my district. I live right across the street. So picking up on the chair, because I know we're very upset about this. So 2021, I wrote a letter saying, why can't it sole source, even before winter related to Central Park Conservancy? So now I have my same question. Can we get rid of the RFP totally and do a sole source as we're doing in the northern part of the district? They're willing to pay whatever the cost is.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer, for your question. I wasn't here in 2021, so I can't speak to that.
I was
but-
around.
I'm sorry?
I was around.
I know you were. Yes, I know you were. I was not. So we've already issued the RFP. It's already out there. So we're at this point are going to continue with our negotiations, and we're in the process of those negotiations.
But you
now.
can't get rid of an RFP. You can't just say, sorry, this RFP is no longer.
At this point, we're not planning to do that. No.
All right. We're going to keep working on that. And sir, I just want to know some costs. How much does it cost? We all love our street trees, and in my area, we've been doing wonderful street tree, how to take care of it sessions, and people love it. So how much does it cost to, I guess, plant one? And then I understand your new program, but I assume that those of us who have allocated funding will get the street trees allocation. I want to make sure that that's clear. So how much does it cost? And then how long will this new plan take? Because we all want street trees.
Absolutely, Councilmember, and I so appreciate your support and advocacy around our street trees. In terms of the cost, the citywide cost for FY25 to plant a street tree is $3,110. This represents a 12% reduction in street tree planting costs from FY 2022. We're really pleased about that, and it's a testament to the hard work of our Forestry division. They've done a number of things to bring that cost down, including bringing in multiple new contractors, MWE contractors, looking at every aspect. So we are seeing that cost come down.
I know it costs a bit, that's a lot, but I understand there's some union issues, and I'm very supportive of the union, so I'll let... and then in terms of the fact that we put money in, those of us who did, we will get our allotment this year, and then I guess the new program kicks in. Is that how it works?
I'm going to just defer to my Jennifer in terms of how that will work. Yeah, she needs to be sworn in.
Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Councilmember, for that question. And yes, we absolutely will honor the spending of the funding that we have right now that any council member has already given us and committed to us. So that will be honored, and it's a transition period of about 2+ years till we get through that process.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, bathrooms also, they cost a fortune. I got one 5.4, another one 13 million, and then everything in between for the Parks Department. So, God, because you can put money in to renovate the wonderful playground, and you do a great job when that happens, but then the bathroom looks like hell. And it's not ADA. So do you have any money for bathrooms? You said in your testimony you have money for bathrooms.
We have a good deal of money for bathrooms, yes, Councilmember, and
Them in my Riverside Park and Saul Bloom Park, please.
we absolutely will. As I said in my testimony, we were pleased to announce last year our focus on better bathrooms, and we are building 46 new ones and renovating 36 additional ones, so a huge investment in bathrooms. But in addition to the investment we're making in bathrooms, I'm so proud of our capital team has just done enormous work in looking at all different ways to bring bathrooms online cheaper, faster. That's why we're looking at modular and trailers and the Portland Loo and many different options to decrease the per unit cost of bathrooms.
My
A lot
parks
of
are
hard
all
work
landmarked,
done.
so they're all landmarked, so they all have to be renovated. So you're saying you have 36 renovations. You can get us a list of those?
Absolutely. Yep, be happy to.
Okay. And then in terms of the recreation centers, I love my recreation center. I got it funded at 14 million many years ago. But when I'm there, signing up for a membership, I know this is Margaret's issue. When you sign up for a membership, it's paper. Can I put in some kiosks or something? Because it takes forever. First, you got to find the clipboard. You can't find the clipboard. Then you can't find the paper. Can't find the paper. Then you got to find a pen. Couldn't find the pen. This is not how to sign up. Margaret. Nelson. I can put in the kiosk if you like.
Hi. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you.
And I
You
guess
may
how much,
begin.
since it's a budget hearing, how much could we save by not doing paper?
That I couldn't answer. We do have an online process, so people can actually get their memberships online
At home,
at home.
but they all
yes.
show up at the desk.
But they can also do it in the center we have our media lab, so they could do it at the media lab if they wanted to.
Okay, that doesn't happen, just so you know.
We'll work on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then just finally, on the pools, you're paying for your pools, but also I have some schools that are being renovated. Is DOE paying for those? They have pools. Or are you paying for those pools?
The pools that are the DOE
schools.
pools being
In-
renovated, that's coming out of DOE's budget.
In the schools?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. But it's a great partnership, and they've been doing terrific work and getting more pools online so
It
that we
takes
can all
5
utilize them.
years, but,
An
okay.
expensive process, yes, we know.
4 to 5 years. I do not understand that. West 96th Street has a house. It's a house. It's like a little house. Are you paying to renovate that? Can you update me on the West 96th Street Broadway house? It's a house, a little house. A little,
We'll need to look into that one and definitely get back to you.
okay, and then just finally lifeguards. Thank you, Iris, for the lifeguards. What's the status? I got some numbers. When are the elections taking place? And what's the status of Mr. Stein?
Thank you, and I want to second that thank you to First Deputy Commissioner Iris Rodriguez-Rosa. She's been doing yeoman's work on lifeguard and recruitment. It's making a difference. And as I said in my testimony, 45% more new recruits last year, and we expect to exceed that this year.
How many do you need total to have everything open? Pools and beaches?
1,000.
Okay, and how many, you had 800 last year or something?
Last year, we got to 930. We expect to be at 1,000 or over this year. And so we need 1,000 to be fully open.
When are the elections that lifeguards have? When do they take place?
I do not have the answer to that question, but we can get back to you on that.
Because they used to be in the winter when nobody was there. That was the reason that they didn't move. Mr. Stein, is he retired?
He has fully retired, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer. Just to follow up before turning it over to another colleague for questions, but Commissioner, for lifeguards, and I do want to recognize our first Deputy Commissioner, Rodriguez-Rosa, who's done an amazing job, as you all have every year, to increase the number of lifeguards, recognizing that we're short of where we need to be. I thought we needed, in the past, from what we understand, is about 1,400 to 1,600 lifeguards. Can you just clarify, what is the number that we fully need to fully
Yes,
staff the pools
thank
and
you
beaches?
for the question, and I'm happy to clarify. We need 1,400 lifeguards to run a second shift at our pools. With 1,000, we can fully open our pools and beaches. With 1,400, we can run a second shift. So we can do early morning, late evening, a second shift.
And
That's
with
the
the
difference
1,000
in those numbers.
Sorry, with the 1,000, what does that enable?
It enables our normal hours of 11 to 7.
Got it. And you-
at pools and beaches. The time is different. But yes, it allows our normal shift at beaches and pools.
From 11 a.m.
One shift,
11 a.m. to 7 p.m.
yes, at pools.
Got it.
Beaches is different. Yep. 10 to, yeah.
Okay. Now, since we have quorum and we have Councilmember Holden on virtual, oh, sorry, I also want to recognize before doing that, we have Councilmembers Narcisse and Palladino here as well. Because we still have quorum, I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Holden, who's on virtually, to ask his questions.
Thank you, Chair, for this, and thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony. My first question is really, or my questions would be on forestry. The city eliminated its usual $2.5 million allocation for forestry services, axing or eliminating 50 critical positions that protect New York City trees and natural resources. Is the Parks Department or the city prepared for the consequences of underfunding its forestry teams? What happens when storms hit and there aren't enough workers to clear dangerous fallen trees and so forth?
Thank you, Council Member, for the question. You're right that we did not receive that tree risk management funding.
Sorry, we're talking
two different things.
This is forest management framework.
Okay, I'm going to let our Deputy Commissioner for Environment and Planning, Jennifer Greenwald, to answer this. Jennifer.
Thank you, Councilmember Holden. I'll just note that some of the words that budget uses doesn't always align with our programs. So it's a little bit confusing. I'm pretty sure what you're referring to is the one-shot funding. That was those 50 lines that you're referencing. We're never, that funding goes towards our forest management framework, not the tree risk management program. The tree risk management program was a different peg, and those people were never hired. It was just, it was cut before, in that financial plan, those folks were never hired. So it wasn't a loss of 55 people for our tree risk management program. Just want to clarify.
Yeah, but we certainly don't have the personnel to care for our trees. Nobody can doubt that. If so, you know, if we had the money for those positions, we should have hired them. But since they weren't, we're still woefully understaffed. For instance, I get and this is separate and apart, but I got a constituent that asked for a tree in her area, and she got an email saying that New York City Parks has begun a cyclical block planting strategy where we no longer respond to service requests for tree planting. Instead, we have laid out a plan to plant the entire city on a cyclical basis, prioritizing the most heat vulnerable neighborhoods first. So in essence, what they were saying, so we expect to be planting in your area 2033 to 2036. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So if I'm requesting a tree, I got to wait over a decade to get my tree planted.
Want me to answer? Yeah. Yes, Councilmember Holden, it is true. We did revamp our tree planting program, and it is mostly with a focus on efficiency. And so that with the new program, what we're able to do is plant, as you said, whole blocks at one time, and not only deal with the planting of the tree, but with stump removal, so that it will be a notable difference in those neighborhoods as we're able to plant those trees. So it's not just one-off and sending contractors, you know, spread across the city, but really making sure that we're using that street tree planting money in the most efficient way, and also being able to create a very visible difference in the street trees, in the streets where we're planting, by dealing with every single item on that block. So yes, it will take longer, but it's a way that we can ensure that every single council district will have access to newly planted trees, but also improvements to their block wholesale, with removing stumps, with taking care of issues on individual blocks, and doing it hopefully more efficiently and more effectively for neighborhoods.
Well, it's not acceptable on any level to wait till 2036 to get a tree planted in any area of the city. So I think that needs to be revisited. Certainly, if we had more funding. And Chair, do I have a couple of minutes or a minute left?
Yes.
Okay. One other question on capital projects. The city completed 37.5 fewer capital projects compared to the previous year. New York City Parks struggled to keep up with its projects, and instead of increasing funding, the administration is dragging its feet. You know, so we are going to see playgrounds, pathways, and facilities deteriorate. So, you know, again, I know this goes into certainly funding and budgets, but what does the administration think? It does not need to reinvest in keeping our parks up to date and certainly usable. This is getting, the fact that our capital projects are taking, I know you'll say that they're not taking longer, but I believe they are. And I think they're way over cost and out of line with the rest of certainly contractors who are doing work, similar work, and private work. But again, with 37.5 fewer capital projects completed, what are we doing to address that in parks?
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. And you're right, it does, it can take a long time, it can be difficult, but we have been really pleased to be part of Capital Process Reform Task Force that the mayor started early on in the administration. We have looked at all different ways to improve our capital process, working with city agencies, working on every single aspect of where we can speed things up. You're right, too, that it is, often more expensive than private contractors, but that's because of the city rules and regulations that we're following around prevailing wages and things like that that are important. And we have had an enormous increase in capital funding, not decrease in capital funding in this administration. As I said in my testimony, we had significant increases in the most recent budget year in capital funding. The Passerelle Bridge in Queens, several significant large projects, capital projects in our budget for sure.
And I'll just add as a technical consideration that the number I believe you're citing is a reference to the preliminary mayor's management report, which reports on completed projects in the first 4 months of this fiscal year, and that number changes from year to year, and it's frankly more of an index of the types of projects where they are, so that number will vary from year to year. So it's not exactly apples to apples, I guess, is the argument. At any given time, we have close to 600 or more capital projects either being designed, into procurement, being constructed, being opened, right? So that is sort of a pipeline of projects that is consistently moving. So a snapshot, if you will, of the first 4 months of any given fiscal year, I don't think we'd see as particularly meaningful in the broader context.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just following up on Councilmember Holden's questions too. In the Forestry Division, we had a hearing recently around wildfires across the city. We know that it is they did immense harm to our urban forest last fall. We will see them again going forward. So to me, and I think to many of us here too, taking care of our trees, our tree canopy, from our street trees to natural areas is incredibly important. What exactly is the staffing count for the Forestry Division within the Parks Department?
Yes, absolutely. So, and as Jennifer attested, there can often be confusion between our Forestry Division and our Natural Resources Division, but we have 220 full-time employees for our Tree Risk Management Division, which are the foresters, the inspectors, climbers, pruners, and then in our Natural Resources Group, which cares for our natural areas. I know, Jennifer, you gave me that. We have 62 full-time positions. Plus 5 agency-funded seasonal hires and 19 grant-funded seasonal staff.
So 220 managing our trees and caring for our trees, separate from the natural areas, but 220 full-time positions within our Forestry Division for our trees, right? That averages about 40 staff members per borough. For the entire borough, 40 staff members. Do you think that is sufficient to care for our street trees and tree canopy across the city?
There is no doubt, as a commissioner, it'd always be, welcome more resources to do our work, certainly, and that's where, we rely so heavily on volunteers and partners and other entities we've worked really closely with to ensure more assistance and more help for our tree care across the city.
But if we want to look at why it takes so long to care or plant trees or to take down trees in our city, it seems to me the first place to start is to look at how woefully underfunded our Forestry Division is, how we simply don't have enough people to plant trees or care for them across the city. And to me, I'm shocked to, again, as I said, the 3 areas you can look at are very important are PEP officers, Forestry Division, urban park rangers. We have 40 full-time staff per borough to take care of all the trees in every single borough in New York City, which is unacceptable and shockingly low. My next question is for natural areas. We have 62 full-time employees in the Parks Department caring for our natural areas across the city. What would you say the acreage is of our natural areas across the city?
That we know, it's 10,000 natural areas.
62 staff to take care of 10,000 acres of natural areas. Do you feel, Commissioner, that is an acceptable level of an adequate amount of staff to care for our 10,000 acres of natural areas?
As I've stated, council member, as a commissioner, I'd always welcome more resources for the work that we do, and we've been very creative in bringing in partners, and we have an important partnership with entities like the Natural Areas Conservancy, great volunteers who come out and help us take care of those 10,000 acres.
I think the answer is no. That's severely inadequate. I just want to paraphrase because I think that is the correct answer there on that one. And just wanted to clarify two programs in particular that we talked about, Councilmember Holden asked about. So the tree risk management program, as I understand it, Deputy Commissioner, from your testimony, that program never got off the ground because it was created and then because of the PEG it was cut, so no hires were made? Or can you clarify what that meant exactly?
So the proposed budget item you're referring to was an expansion of our existing tree
Right.
risk management approach, right? So
But that expansion never got off the ground, correct?
Exactly, right.
So it was funded, it was cut, so no hires were made to expand the tree risk management program.
that is
Right.
correct.
And the trail formalization program, I know there was a lot of back and forth with the council and City Hall. This is something that City Hall has funded in the past. They did not do so. The council picked it up, and we expected also that City Hall would continue funding it. They did not do so. How did Parks address the fact that funding for the trail formalization program was not there in the budget? What happened to the staff? What was the impact of that?
So, Councilmember, you're conflating, I think, two quite slightly different topics, so I'll just quickly clarify. So the trail formalization, as you noted, similar to the tree risk management item, was an expansion of our existing. So we have staff that are doing trail formalization. This was a proposed expansion that was not able to move forward. So there's that. What I believe you're referring to is a funding item that we've also referred to as the one-shot funding,
Right.
which had been funded in various ways over the last several years. Some led by council initiatives, other times by the administration at the behest of the council, and but was not funded by either the council nor the administration in this most recent fiscal year. That's the forest management framework work.
Okay. We're trying to keep them all straight. Got it. Okay. But the bottom line is, how did all of these things impact the staffing in the forestry division overall? How did you all adapt to this?
So there was a
Meant that we did not, the staffing was intended to expand programming, expand trail maintenance programming. It just meant that we weren't able to do that expansion, hire or expand that programming.
Yeah.
Sure. In addition, at the time that that the financial plan came out for those sort of one-shot, we had about 27 people on staff, and we were able to absorb almost all of them in our grant-funded programs through this fiscal year.
Got it. Okay, and I commend you all for doing so too. I know that's something we had talked about. Now, look, I think a lot of these issues when it comes to our tree canopy are the result of City Hall failing to fund the forestry division the way that it should. These numbers are unacceptably low. One thing I will note, though, and we'll hold a hearing on the tree canopy later on this year too. But I do think, and I know I'm not the only one that thinks this, that the Parks Department really needs to evaluate the contractors that it's working with to manage our street trees. We had gone over before a contractor that was convicted on serious charges. I appreciate the steps the Parks Department has taken to address the issues with that contractor. But there's also another one that's come to our attention too, which is Griffin's Landscaping. They pled guilty on October 26, 2024 to one count of conspiracy to commit bribery, one count for wire fraud, and the Griffin's Landscaping, the owner of the company, was recently denied his motion to withdraw his guilty plea by the district court judge. Griffin Landscaping is currently bidding on a $20 million plus of work in the New York City Parks Department, of which 2 projects have been awarded and are awaiting registration by the New York City Controller. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yep.
And so I fail to understand the Parks Department's approach to working with these deeply problematic contractors that are multiple times now tied up in serious federal criminal charges. What is the decision-making process here to continue going back and doing business with these actors?
Thank you, Council Member, for the question. And as you said earlier, planting trees equitably and across all the city is really important to the Parks Department. And in order for us to improve and invest in our urban canopy as fairly and efficiently as possible, we believe it's in the best interest of New Yorkers to continue working with the contractor. They're under an active monitoring agreement that's overseen by the Department of Investigation. And so our Parks contracting determinations are made prior to each award based on a thorough review of a vendor's business experience and ability to meet the requirements of the project. And so, we are doing our best to, really enhance and invest in the urban tree canopy as fairly and efficiently as possible.
But are there a set of standards, whether it's ethical standards, criminal conduct, that especially goes to the business practices of these tree contractors that you all employ in evaluating whether to give them contracts or to deny them contracts?
That is where, the active monitoring agreement overseen by the Department of Investigations, that's what we rely on.
I would encourage you all to take a look in particular. As I said before, we've still got more work to do with the other contractor, Dragon Eddy contractor, but I know you all took steps there as well. I would strongly encourage you all to review this situation with Griffin Landscaping as well, because the charges are serious and they go towards the business practices of these companies that are then receiving business contracts in large sums, $20 million plus from the Parks Department in the city of New York. What is the current staffing level for wage enforcement investigators at the Parks Department?
That is a question that we'd have to get back to you on.
And is there any plan to rehire or hire more staff for that unit?
That is a question I will have to get back to you on. Okay.
Yeah. It would be helpful because, there are, of course, a number of unions and union labor that are paying healthy, livable, prevailing wages. And it's important to make sure that the contractors that we're working with, too, are held to those standards, that we're using more union labor for Parks Department roles. And a key piece of that is to ensure that wage levels are adequate. So if you can all look into it, too, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely. I mean, making sure that we're following and enforcement, all rules, city rules and regulations, especially around wages, is an important priority of ours and of the city, and something we take very seriously. So we're happy to provide further information to you on it.
Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Councilmember Marte, who had questions. Was not here? Okay. We'll go to Councilmember Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, always a pleasure to see you. I want to begin by thanking you and everybody in the parks operations teams in Staten Island and Southwest Brooklyn for the wonderful job they do each and every year. We love our parkies in District 50. I want to ask something I ask at almost every budget hearing, which is about the tree and sidewalk program. Very important, for homeowners, when city trees uplift their sidewalks, and unfortunately, we never have the resources in order to really get through that backlog of folks who are waiting for their sidewalks to be repaired. So, could you tell us in the prelim budget, what level of rating you expect parks to get through in terms of the backlog, and then how much would be required to be budgeted in order for you to get through the backlog period?
Thank you, Councilmember Carr, for the question, and we agree with you. We know it's an important program, and we know that it's important to homeowners. I'm going to toss it over to Jennifer to answer in terms of your specific questions around budget there.
Sure. Thank you for your question, Councilmember Carr, and we have some answers because you do ask this every time. Our program right now, we're committed to all the service requests that we have within a sort of a certain number at a certain point of time of 89 and above, of 85 and above. So it's sort of, if we were to do everything in Staten Island that was 75 and up, it would be close to $10 million. So there's an estimate. We do still have some inspections that we have not done, so that doesn't count sites that we haven't looked at yet or rated. So that's one example just for Staten Island.
I appreciate that, and it feels like, you gave a number in the high 80s. I feel like in prior years, even without council enhancements, we were doing ratings better than that. So has the program financing diminished, or is there simply just a larger number of cases?
That's an excellent question. The program has not diminished. In fact, we have baseline funding of over $12 million in capital funds and $1 million in expense funds for those individual sites that aren't capitally eligible. So we feel very good about the funding level. We, of course, as any capital program, we're like sort of catching up from COVID and other slowdowns, and we did have some issues with vendors. And right now we have 6, I think, active contracts or 7 active contracts, and we've done 1,000 sites since these contracts have been active. So we're on the upswing. We feel pretty good about the program and particularly the funding for it.
Appreciate that. And I guess I have a similar question with respect to tree stump removals. There was a time in the not too distant past, there was a large backlog. I think there's been strides made to improve that, but is there a backlog, and do you have sufficient funding to address stump removals as you are aware of them?
Great, that's a great question. We haven't for a very long time had a good estimate of stump removals, and we've actually been taking this past year to work with a consultant to get a good number. And we don't think there's more than about 30,000 stumps. I know that sounds like a lot on the streets, but remember we remove close to 10,000 trees a year, and any trees that are done by our in-house crews, they don't take the stump out because it's not the same sort of tree risk issue. But we've improved certain things, like our smaller tree removal contracts include stumps as well, and that's in addition to the generous funding that we've received from the council each year and the baseline funding that the city has dedicated to stump removals. In addition, as the commissioner said earlier, now that we're switching to this new neighborhood program where we're not kind of sort of dropping in and putting a tree in where there are opportunities, we're going block by block, we'll be getting stumps through that capital program, which is in addition to our existing expense-funded stump removals.
That's great. That's wonderful to hear. My next question is about comfort stations. Some colleagues have talked about the expense involved in capital programming that the Parks does, in particular comfort stations. You guys recently installed what we call in Staten Island the Richmond Reliever, not the Portland Loo. And I just love to hear about the efficiencies you think that program will bring once you're able to batch more installations together, which I think is the point of the program.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Carr, and you've jumped ahead on the naming for Staten Island, which we appreciate. I think that the Richmond Reliever or the Portland Loo is just an example of the many different aspects that we are looking at, the many different ways that we can innovate and bring down the costs and the timeline for bathroom construction in the city. And so in addition to the Richmond Reliever or the Portland Loo, looking at modular, looking at trailers, looking at every different available option out there to make sure that we're doing all we can to reduce both price and also time frame. With the Portland Loo, there are 5. There's going to be 1 in each borough, and they are intended as a pilot. We want to see how they function. Putting anything in a New York City park, it's going to be, they're going to experience a whole lot of different situations. So we want to see really how they function, how the maintenance is, how they work, and so we'll see we'll get them out there, see the results of this pilot, and then see how and if we want to move forward on it. But there's no doubt that it's a lower cost option and something that we can get out there quickly.
That's great. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Menon?
Thank you so much, Chair. So just a couple of questions, Commissioner. You mentioned that in your testimony that there will be $5 million in new baseline funding for aquatics and lifeguard staff, and I know the Chair asked you some questions about that. So I just want to have a better understanding because, as you know, the Council passed and the Mayor signed my bill to mandate free swim lessons for all second graders.
Yes.
What is happening in terms of the implementation of that mandate?
Yes. Well, so as you noted, Councilmember, and thank you for the question, we were pleased to get the swim safety expansion funding. In terms of the bill, there needs to be funding to support training all second graders in Learn to Swim. So with the swim safety expansion funding, it allows us to expand our Swim for Life program. It's focused on swim instruction for second graders, and we're able to hire 91 new staff to support this expansion, and they will be, we're going to be doing this in coordination with DOE. They're a key factor here, and it allows us to expand our aquatic staff and our Swim for Life programming to DOE schools across the city.
But how many children specifically is this going to cover? Is this truly a universal program?
it wouldn't be universal based on funding, but I can tell you that we're on track to serve over 5,000 Swim for Life participants in FY25, and we project we'll be able to serve an additional 4,200 Swim for Life participants in FY26 through this new swim safety expansion, for an anticipated total of 9,200 Swim for Life participants.
I mean, again, I would just urge that the administration try to do what the bill was focused on doing, which is, again, to provide the free swim lessons to every second grader. You know, a partnership that Council Member Krishnan and I launched, a public-private partnership with Asphalt Green, I think shows that you can think outside of the box. We don't need to use the city pools. We can use other pools. We mapped out, I think, close to 900 pools across the city that could be utilized, and it's one significant way that we can increase scalability of that program.
We agree, thank you, and we're partnering with Asphalt Green, using our aquatics instructors for swim instruction in Brooklyn. We're visiting the young students at that program recently, so we agree it's a great partnership.
Okay, and just in my remaining time, want to build upon some other questions that some colleagues asked. What right now is the average price and timeline to construct a bathroom in a New York City park?
Yes, I have that. Just bear with me. I have bathrooms, I know. Hold on just one sec for me. I have those. It's here. Just bear with. Bathrooms. Let's see. Okay. The estimate for a public restroom reconstruction is $2.25 million for an in-house design and $3.25 million for a consultant design.
So in Rupert Park in my district, the cost now is $4 million. It's been over 3 years since we've seen really any progress. I mean, these costs are astronomical. You know, we've got to have some type of procurement reform to bring both the cost down as well as the timeline. So I know you spoke a little bit about this, but what specifically can you commit to that is going to both bring the cost down and the timeline down?
So as I said earlier, and as answering the earlier question, looking at innovative new designs, different opportunities for different types of bathrooms, prefab, trailers, the Portland Loo, those are all ways that we're looking to bring the cost down. And then also we've been very active in the capital process reform discussions and looking at every element of that procurement and construction timeline. We're also working with DDC and building out a group of bathrooms through design build that's intended to serve to bring down cost and timeline. So many different ways that we're looking at doing that.
And I know you mentioned to Councilmember Carr a lot of these elements. I mean, what I would just say is I feel like we're at the same point we were in the budget hearing last year, where we had the exact same types of conversation, and yet we're not seeing a lot of progress on bringing the costs and the timeline down. And I think it's imperative to do so.
Thank you. We agree, and we're working hard on it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to, echo that point that Councilmember Menon mentioned about, just finding ways to be as creative as possible to expand swim lessons, whether it's with, and there are a number of organizations that are ready to do that work, whether it's the YMCA, Asphalt Green, and many others too, and look forward to more conversations around that as well, as I know we share that same goal. Councilmember Aviles?
Thank you so much, Chair. Good afternoon. So much talk about bathrooms. I still, Commissioner, with all due respect, I still don't understand why it would cost the city $2.25 and it would cost an additional $1 million for a consultant for same square footage of bathroom. Like that price discrepancy is quite mind-blowing. I guess in the notion of, I am very blessed to have 2 public pools in my district, along with a good number of green space, which does not have remotely adequate amount of staffing to actually manage the intensity and usage of those spaces. in Sunset Park in particular, this is a park that's 24 acres, and it has 2 bathroom stalls. Does this ratio, 24 acres of park space and 2 bathroom stalls, does that concern the Parks Department at all?
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question, and it absolutely does. As part of what I talked about in my testimony, as part of our Vital Parks Explorer tool, we've mapped all the bathrooms that we have in our inventory. And we were pleased, over 70% of New Yorkers have a public bathroom within a 10-minute walk of their house. That we know that that 30% is really important, and that's why we've mapped them, and that's why we're really focused on targeting our investments to where they're needed the most. The Parks Department maintains over 600 public restrooms in New York City. And we are the largest provider of public restrooms in New York City. We have more public restrooms than there are Starbucks in state parks, in parks, there are more Starbucks across the state. So we think a lot about bathrooms. We're very, very focused on them, there's no doubt. And that's why I said in my testimony, with our Let's Swim, with our Better Bathrooms initiative that we announced $150 million in new investment in bathrooms. So 46 new ones we're building, 36 that we're renovating. So I hear you, 2 stalls is not enough, but it's been an incredible focus of the agency.
That,
absolutely.
And I guess I'll just underscore, I'll follow up with you because on the Red Hook side, we have 58 acres of park space and 2 bathroom stalls.
Yep.
So I've been bemoaning bathrooms and the lack of bathrooms with all this park space that brings hundreds of kids and wonderful people and nowhere to pee. Lots of water, and lots of stuff. Yeah. I'd like to, something that continues to come up in our district is particularly around leagues and permits. And I've recently been informed that there have been a cutting of permits, particularly for night baseball. I have a league that's been playing for the 80s, pays all these fees for their permits, and were recently told that they were getting cut an hour and a half. An hour and 15 minutes for this league means many games and could potentially gut their opportunity to play in these fields. We were told it was efficiency. These are automatic lights. Can you explain this situation to me?
I would have to look into the specific league that you're referencing. We did go through a process, a rule change with our permits. And with that rule change, what we looked to do was preference nonprofit and youth organizations in our permitting. And so there were definitely changes that went into effect that have had ramifications for some. I don't know this specific, but if you tell us the specific league, we're absolutely happy to look into it.
Their permit was cut from 8 to 11:50, which they had been for decades, to from 8 to 10. So an hour and 15 minutes for them is significant because they play every minute they can get.
I'm sure, yes.
Given that they've been doing this for decades, the math doesn't work with how much they're actually paying for the permits and how they can sustain a season with so much cut of play time. So I'd like to follow up with you, but this is existential for them. And the efficiency argument isn't one that seems to have been justified in a way that we could be like, okay, that's reasonable. Because somebody's not standing outside with waiting to flip on the switch.
We're happy to take a look at it, absolutely.
And I guess there's so many questions. I thank you, park staff. I absolutely agree 100% that we need to fully fund the care and just equity of our park staff. 700 cuts is unacceptable, and we see it every day with the rodents, with the trash, and I know you're trying your best, and we will continue to push for significant funding for our green spaces. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Before going to our next colleague, just wanted to focus on another area. We talked about forestry for a bit. Our Parks Enforcement Patrol, our PEP officers, they play a crucial role in our park system, keeping them safe and on their duty. But how many PEP officers do we have for all of New York City?
Thank you, Council Member, for the question. The budgeted tax levy headcount for the PEP division is 369 with an active headcount of 346.
So
PEP
roughly
officers.
about 350 PEP officers, again, for all of New York City. That's about 70 PEP officers per borough, right? Can you tell me, what is the schedule of the PEP officers? I mean, how are 70 PEP officers, their entire borough of Queens, let's say, how do they get around to all their parks? What is their schedule? Are there parks that are not getting any PEP officers? How does the Parks Department work with 70 PEP officers for far more park space than the number of staff they have?
Just bear with me one sec. Where were you? So we work hard, Council Member, to deploy our PEP officers in a manner that's equitable across the 5 boroughs. The PEP, in terms of schedule, deployment hours really vary based on enforcement needs, but PEP officers generally work hours ranging from 7 a.m. to midnight throughout the city. There are instances where officers may start or end earlier based on the needs of the boroughs, but we are looking to provide PEP coverage, in the areas where they're needed most. Some of our PEP officers are mobile, so we provide coverage through mobile patrols, fixed post patrols. Patrol methods also include by foot, by bicycle. We have mounted horses, we have vehicles, so a wide range of different ways that we cover our park system.
But the math isn't mathing, right? If there's 70 PEP officers per borough, I'm having a hard time seeing how they are able to cover all the different parks in that borough. So are there parks that don't have PEP officers, or do the schedules have to be truncated and changed so they can move around to all the parks? How does that work?
Our PEP officers are deployed, as I said, strategically, equitably, as much as we can across the city. They're generally focused on parks with high usage or where there are pressing quality of life concerns. And we also are very reliant on partnership with PD. So we work very closely together with PD to cover, areas and to work in partnership. But it's really, we're looking to spread them as best we can to high need areas.
So 40 forestry staff per borough in a time when we're seeing so many wildfires, 70 PEP officers per borough in this moment. And isn't it your understanding, Commissioner, that Mayor Adams' priority is public safety in our city?
Yes, absolutely.
And keeping New Yorkers safe? Mm-hmm. Safe when they're in their parks, safe from wildfires? Wouldn't you agree those are priorities of the mayor?
Those are priorities of the mayor. They're priorities of our agency as well.
I cannot understand how, with so few resources, this administration is able to keep its parks and our city safe, able to keep all of us as New Yorkers safe from climate change. It's shocking to look at the disparity between the needs of the Parks Department on each of these issues and the staffing you have in place. Turn it over to Councilmember Ressler for questions.
Wonderful. Commissioner Donahue, great to see you. And thank you, Chair Krishnan. I'll just say for a moment, at a time when there is such turmoil and tumult across the building, it's really important that we have capable, competent, steady leaders in our agencies, and I appreciate your continued service to our city.
Thank you.
My mother told me to always lead with a compliment.
Well done. Should be proud.
Vicki says my mother's right. So always. I'll give you 2 more compliments. Recently promoted Community Board 1 Administrator for Parks, Mary Selig Hussein, is just terrific. She's been, you all know it, she's just a tremendous partner for our office and for everybody in Williamsburg and Greenpoint. Really lucky to have her, and really grateful to her and your whole team for the partnership on the mini forest that we're doing in Williamsburg. We're really excited about the Milwaukee mini forest that we're hoping to get planted later this spring. So thank you for everyone who's worked with us on that. I think it's a great model that hopefully we'll replicate in council districts across the city. We're really thrilled to help fund it. And I do want to echo Councilmember Aviles' concerns on the permitting issues. We have the same problem in McCarran. People are pissed. We would love to see that issue fixed. There are 2 or 3 issues, depending on time, that I would like to get through. First is around second shifts. We know that the budget proposed an increase in about 480 parks workers, including 230 second shift workers, but that still leaves the parks part-time headcount down by nearly 40% since the time you all took office, 38%. That's a massive reduction. I appreciate in your testimony that you highlighted that 200 separate locations, including 121 of our busiest parks, are going to be getting a second shift. But think about that. That's 2 parks per council district. How many parks do we have in each of our council districts that really need a second shift? So McCarran gets one, but not McGolrick. So Cabin Plaza gets it, but not the Promenade. It's not enough. How many workers do you need how many additional workers do you need to be able to provide the necessary second shift so that our parks conditions improve? The 311 complaints were way up this summer. The number of parks in acceptable conditions were down this summer, down to 85%. It's not surprising. You don't have the person power. Somebody in Brooklyn Parks told me they haven't had this few staff in 40 years. So what's the head count that we need, the person power we need to actually be able to achieve second shift staffing at the level that we should expect?
Thank you, Council Member, for both the compliments and the questions. So we are quite pleased with the expansion of second shift. We know it makes a difference. We know it is important. What we try and do is target that second shift to those areas that we know are heavy barbecuing areas, the busiest areas in our parks. And so that's why the over 400 positions that will be deployed to second shift are very helpful and important for us. As I've said, as a commissioner, would always welcome more resources. We know second shift works and is important both for, the coverage and the cleaning, but just to have the staff in the park into the evening. I can't give you an exact number of,
Would you be willing to share a proposal with Chair Krishnan and OMB for what more robust
further expansion of second shift? Yes, absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you. We would welcome that. If that would be very helpful. I'd now like to just shift to tree pruning. So I was at Community Board 1 last week. A lot of talk about Community Board 1 today. I was at Community Board 1 last week, and I was getting harangued by a constituent in South Williamsburg about a tree on a number of trees on their block that they want to see pruning. And I explained that the Parks Department recently rolled out a new approach to pruning that you all have said is going to make things more efficient and operationally, improve things operationally for you all. But I said that unfortunately, each area in New York City is only going to receive tree pruning once every 9 years now.
So the new initiative we rolled out, Councilmember, sorry to interrupt, is around tree planting, not pruning. Our pruning cycle has stayed the same. It's every 7 years.
So if there's a request for planting, that it's every 9 years. That's right. So you've broken community districts down into 3 chunks, and once every 9 years, you'll be coming to fill gaps where you identify a need for tree planting?
Sorry, no. During the 9 years, the entirety of that given community board.
Yeah, no. But I don't know what the word is. It's not a quadrant.
Or sort of waves, or I mean.
How do you describe a third of a community board? What's a third of a community board? Whatever. In that third of the community board, you'll come once every 9 years to plant a tree. So if you came last year, it's going to be at the end of the decade, 9 years from now, that you're coming to plant a tree. That's a question.
Yeah, okay. Thank you again. And we estimate that based on our tree planting opportunities now, it will take about 9 years to fill all of them. When we're done, maybe it won't take that long to get the next round. We don't know. Right, so we're looking today, based on what we know about opportunities, that it will take us about 9 years to fill every possible space in the entire city.
But think about it. None of us are going to be here in 9 years. right? I mean, even if we're all lucky enough to stick around for another term, we're gone in 4 years. So what am I supposed to do to look my constituents in Northern Greenpoint or South Williamsburg or wherever that area is in the eye and tell them, I'm sorry, the Parks Department isn't going to come by to plant a tree for 9 years? I don't understand how that's a logical policy. That's like leaving communities out in the cold for a very long time, certainly longer than any of us are going to be around.
Thank you for the question. I understand, and it's something we really tried to work through when we designed this program.
Yeah.
And that's one reason we split things up into sort of waves of 3, like you were saying. So every community board, we go by community boards, not council districts, because they're more stable.
But you understand that
we'll get something.
Like,
And
we'll stick with Williamsburg and Greenpoint, South Williamsburg, North Side, Greenpoint. For the folks in Greenpoint, they don't care that you went to plant trees in South Williamsburg last year and that you're not going to be in Greenpoint for 9 years. It's 3 miles away. It's a different neighborhood. It's a different community. It doesn't help. So to me, this is a plan that like makes sense on paper and is a good operational plan. But to tell my community members, or for you to come out and try and tell my community members that you're going to be there in 9 years, they're going to scream at you, right? And they're going to be really pissed. They want to see it if there's a spot on their block where they're looking for a tree, telling them that it's a 9-year wait is like, it's never going to happen, right? So I've made this clear to your staff. I'm raising it in a hearing after I've already said it to you all privately. I don't think this policy makes any sense. I really think you should revisit it. I think it's something that works on paper and doesn't work in practice and doesn't work in our communities. So I'd really hope that you'll rethink it and make exceptions and make different approaches so that we don't have to tell our constituents that there's a 9-year wait until the Parks Department's coming to plant a tree.
I appreciate that. I understand why change is very complicated and difficult. We really believe that this is more equity driven, this is more efficient, and also it's more predictable. Today, when you make a service request, we can't really tell you when we're going to inspect it. It's at least a year, if not more or longer. We can't tell you when that tree is going to come. And we don't feel comfortable with that approach where we're really just serving communities who know how to request trees and yet still cannot provide sort of predictable responses to even those people who are asking. So when we have a choice of serving some over serving everybody, we're choosing an equitable approach and a predictable and efficient approach. We think that's an excellent use of city resources.
I think to say that a predictable approach is coming by essentially once a decade, right? Once, you have a mayor or council member has 8 years. Over the course of our whole 8 years in office, we're going to have to tell constituents that the Parks Department's never coming by to plant trees during that period, right? It's like it just is, to me, I understand that you don't have enough resources. We should fix that. We should put more resources into planting trees. I've certainly put a lot of resources into planting trees in District 33, and I know some of my colleagues have as well. But to try and tell us that it's a once-a-decade opportunity to get a tree planted on your block, I can't look my constituent in the eye and have that conversation without being screamed at, right? And so I don't think that the solution you've come up with actually works. We're happy to continue to give feedback and give input on how to do something more equitably, more fairly, but this, to me, is a bad policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ressler. One follow-up question. I do understand the need and importance of efficiency too as a goal. Is it because the way it's divided up that the areas are divided up into thirds that it creates a 9-year cycle? Like, is there any way to do, even with the current framework, to reconfigure how it's divided up to reduce the amount of time? Have you all considered that, or how do you look at that?
I think when we talk about efficiency, it goes back to, when you think about if we're responding to individual street tree requests, we're trying to deal with costs coming down, so we're sending contractors, 2 in Brooklyn, 2 in Queens. It's not the most efficient, and it impacts price. So remember, we're trying to address concerns that have been raised here and across the city about how do we bring price down or per tree planting. So it makes sense if a contractor can do a whole block, all right, or a series of blocks or a whole community board district in one planting. And we talked about this, council member, you saw it with our block pruning.
Right.
You saw how effective that was. Yep. And your neighborhood all of a sudden, and that's standard 7-year pruning cycles nationwide, that's a standard. And so that's what we're looking to replicate here, is to have an impact that is efficient, that's equitable, and that will help us to drive costs down.
And I'll just note, council member, that I understand you're not necessarily questioning the approach, but the pace of it. And we really have learned over time that there's a limit that the market can handle in terms of growing trees and contracting and all of that. And so we are trying to be really realistic in terms of what we understand the capacity of the market is. And we may learn as we do this that because it's more efficient, we'll attract different folks that will be able to grow the trees we need. And we ask for you to understand, and maybe we'll learn, and maybe the pace will be picked up. But we looked at what we think is possible and are trying to make really sort of set appropriate expectations.
Right, I understand. And I, like I said, I understand the goals. I was looking specifically about the time and the pace itself. But I appreciate the further conversation with all of us on it too. Councilmember Narcisse?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Sue, for being here. I have to give a shout out for my new director for Marine Park, Eric Peterson, and of course, Marty. Yeah. I love parks, so. Given the increase of fires in parks, right? I started hearing it. What specific actions parks are taking to ensure better fire prevention?
Thank you for the question, and obviously that was, it was so alarming for us, council member. What we saw comes out of, the driest October on record in history. We have, through our natural resources group, spent years focused on how we can do the best in terms of maintaining our urban forests, reducing Phragmites, reducing invasive species and mugwort, things that are more likely to choke and damage forests. So it's really a continuation of our ongoing work. We are also part of a task force with FDNY and our sister agencies. Given what we all experienced with the wildfires last fall, working together, seeing how we can all make sure that our response, our interaction is the most efficient at dealing with what we know will be ongoing situations because of climate change.
And thank you. And additional, we need the staff to actually do those actions. How much do a parks cost roughly, the dog parks?
How much does a dog park?
Roughly.
I would need to get back to. It really varies on where it is, what size it is.
The smallest one that we can, let's start with the smallest part.
I don't know that I have an average price.
Because I have Marine Park, Garrison Beach, and of course, Canarsie asked me for dog parks.
I'm happy to get back to you and let you know, but I don't think we have offhand what the average price is.
All right, so you're going to get back to me with the money because I have 3 different places that asked me.
We certainly can, but I'll just add that it is a substantial construction project, like any other capital project, like a full park playground renovation. But we've seen prices that range from $500,000 on the lower end to in some cases, if it's large enough and if there are connections in terms of water connections or what have you, like that, we've seen prices certainly higher than that, depending on the footprint and the site conditions, as the commissioner noted. But on the lower end, we've seen projects advance for around $500,000.
But we'll get back to you with specifics.
Yeah.
Okay. Swimming pool. I don't have any. I have that little mini, I need a microscope to see the one that we have in Mill Basin area. Yeah. So we need our kids to swim, right? Mm-hmm. A speaker, been a very huge advocate, especially when it comes to Black and brown communities, right? Yeah. So now they cannot swim in a bucket. We need to have actual swimming pool. Mm-hmm. I don't have any, especially in my district, Canarsie and Flatlands area. That's been a problem. Any plan to address that equity, making sure that we have swimming pool, especially in those areas?
Absolutely, council member. And as I said in my testimony, we're so pleased with the new pools that we are able to add to the system with Shirley Chisholm and Roy Wilkins and Walter Gladwin. We have gone through an effort to identify where there are swim deserts, so we're very focused on looking to add target investments where they're needed. And we have also been very active, not only in mayoral funding for pools, but taking advantage of grant money, New York State Swims money to bring as much money as possible into the system. So absolutely, we're focused on where we can expand. It's an expensive proposition, but we absolutely want to add more pools where we can.
Please expand over there by those areas that I know of, like Canarsie, Flatlands, Shipshead Bay area. Gun violence is a big problem for me, especially in the Canarsie and Flatlands area. We know gun violence does not occur in silo. It's a culmination of different issues. And one of the issues, the young folks don't have no place to go. Yeah. So myself personally, been going around with those young folks and ask them, what do they want for me? They want to have a community center. Where I'm looking at, even the mayor everyone agree, that flat area by 80s is a problem. And they're all hanging around doing nothing, absolutely nothing. So can we have an assessment done to help me out? So because it's a parkland that we have IS-68 between 82nd and 81st. So no one play handball anymore. So can we actually look into that space, work with me to bring something that those young folks that causing problem can have a place to go? I need your help on that.
Absolutely, yes. And we're happy to look at it with you and certainly understand. And that's why we're so focused on, we participated actively in the Mayor's Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. We know that by bringing program and activities, it makes a difference for young people. We need them to have things to do. So happy to look at a certain space with you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to have your help on that one. The question I have now in front of me, the last round of PEGs included the elimination of the Community Gardens program, which was a program targeted at high-risk youth, as well as the NYC Sparks program, which provided girls with engagement in STEM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. These programs were never even able to begin before being cut as part of the PEG program. But hopefully, we will see these programs restored and brought back to life. Have there been discussion with OMB or the mayor regarding the restoration of this program? And how much would it cost to restore these programs? How much additional headcount would be needed? What can the council do to help your agency?
Yes, thank you, Council Member, for the question. As the budget process moves forward, we're in continuous conversations with OMB and the Mayor's office regarding agency needs. And we definitely are committed, we remain committed to delivering, on our broader mission. In terms of you're right, the PEG savings were enacted, and we had not hired or spent for these programs when they were eliminated. In terms of the New York City Sparks program, to restore, it would cost, it's 6 positions and $350,000. And in terms of the Community Gardens programs, it's 2 positions and $150,000.
Thank you. You've been the best. You know I love parks so much. And Chair, one more question. Sure. The leash, because the dogs out. Do we have signage actually to let people know what is the rule and regulation of the park?
Absolutely.
Because people are complaining, the dogs are running. Wow.
Yes, absolutely. We have so much signage, and our Deputy Commissioner Mark Folk oversees our sign shop, and we have spent so much time on signage in our parks and making sure that it's clear where people, where their dogs can and can't be off leash. It's on our rule sign. We try and make it really clear. There's extensive signage out there. Yes.
Okay, the last one. Also, can we get trash bin along the marshland that we have by Marine Park? Because it's such a beautiful area, but there's no container, no trash there, no trash can there to hold it.
Absolutely.
So you should, I know you visited with me from Marine Park and over there, so you know how beautiful it is.
Beautiful.
You are always welcome, but we need swimming pool too, so let's talk about that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Narcisse. I have to come visit with you too. and see your pork. That's right.
You did.
That's
Yes, you
right.
did. Thank you.
I also just, before turning over to my next colleague, we just wanted to, I forgot to mention before, but I do appreciate the expansion, the second shift program, the 100 hotspots. I think that was something that we had discussed last budget too, was very important to the council. So I look forward, I think Councilmember Ressler raised this point too, but look forward to continued conversation about ways that we can expand that program even beyond the 100 hotspots that we have. And I'll turn it over to Councilman Palladino.
Good afternoon. Oop, am I on? I'm on? Yeah. Okay, good. Good afternoon. Thank you very, very much. I want to say, of course, to you guys, I know how hard you work, and we're circling back now, like people have said repeatedly throughout this meeting. The frustration, the weight, the understaffing, the budget that we keep giving you for capital projects. Not that we're going to see it come to fruition, sadly. Those are the realities of what we are up against right now. And I've discussed many times, and since this is a budget hearing, it seems like this might be the best time to bring it up. Again, I really would love to see if Parks could break this down into 51 different districts, whereas the money that's allotted is allotted specifically for a borough in a very realistic manner, whereas we could then fund projects that we can see a beginning, a middle, and an end. Because at this rate, we are giving you, in my office alone, close to, here's 11, here's 8, that's 19, and another close to $1 million for miscellaneous. So that's an awful lot of money to come out of one council member's office, as well as cooperation from the speaker and so on. But the frustration that you are going through is certainly one that I could feel for you, because there's nothing worse than telling a constituent. And, your auto emails hurt when a constituent hears 7 to 9 years. 7 to 9 years is a ridiculously long time. And the city in its whole overall topographical hasn't really changed all that much. We've still had these parks, because a great many of these parks are, 100 years old, 50 years old, 80 years old. These are realities. And our tree-lined streets have become something of the past to make way for bicycles and bike lanes and all this other unrealistic stuff. So the dream of tree-lined streets are kind of going to the wayside. I do want to say that I have several things which I'm going to talk to you about offline, not today, but I do want you to put some focus on Flushing Airport, if you could. It's coming to my district, and EDC is taking bids, and this is an extremely serious situation. It is a wetlands. I'm extremely disturbed by what they want to do, EDC, to make way for 80 acres of what once was a functioning small airport, and they want to use 27 acres of that to build on. Now, we did the 26th Avenue breakthrough to connect the two roads. EDC had to go down 120 feet to get to stable so they could build this road. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. We know how beautiful APEC is. So what I want to try to do is work with Parks. I don't know what your limits are concerning this particular project, but if you would talk to me about it, or we could get together and discuss this, because needless to say, this is in the billions of dollars. And I very much want, I was in touch with APEC, I very much want to work together, because if this should happen, they've tried 3 times to make this work. It's a flooded area. It's not feasible for building. So I'd like to see what your intake is, what you feel about it, and I'd like to work together with Parks so that we could make this something that could be absolutely stunning. And like I said, we're not in the millions with an M. We're in the B, with the billions with a B. So I'll talk to you about this other stuff offline. It got late. I got to go back to Queens. But thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. We appreciate the support. And we do work closely with EDC on a number of different projects, so we can absolutely talk about that.
Just wanted it on your radar. The bids are due What's today, the 20th?
Yeah.
Bids are due today is the final.
Wow.
So
Okay.
we'll
Yeah.
talk, okay?
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Before we move into the second round, I just wanted to highlight another area of our urban park rangers, right? We know that our park rangers, they are provide an essential service in our city's parks, making sure New Yorkers of all ages understand and expand their knowledge about the history of parks, the many animals and plants that reside within them. They were just at my children's school recently too. But their funding for many of their positions isn't actually baselined. And so every year, they have to live with the uncertainty that their jobs may not be funded or reinstated. I know that. I've spoken with many of them. I've heard their concerns about it, and they've really impacted me about the disparity between how important their roles are in our parks, yet how every year they are afraid and deeply concerned about losing their jobs. And so obviously, this is no way to be funding such essential workers in our park system. It's no way, frankly, for us to be budgeting at all with these, temporary temporary positions. We call them one-shots, budget speak. But jobs shouldn't be every year subject to renewal, especially jobs like these where they are serving our parks every day in perpetuity. And so I just wanted to know what is the current head count for urban park rangers? How many are actually permanent or baseline funded, and how many are temporary or one-shot funded?
Yes, absolutely, council members. So of the current budgeted headcount of 89 total ranger positions, 39 are baselined and 50 are one-shot funded.
39 are baseline, 50 are one-shot funded. So that's about 89 park rangers total, right, for the whole city?
Yep, there's 90, almost 90 total rangers, yep.
Got it. So that's about 18 per borough. I mean, do you feel like that is an adequate number of park rangers for an entire borough, 18 park rangers?
As you spoke to, council member, you're right, they do provide such an important service in terms of education and outreach and helping us enforce park rules. Our park rangers are such a visible presence across the city. They've played a really important role. We try and spread them out as equitably as we can and have them be, have as much exposure to kids and students and free programming as possible.
It's just shocking to me again because I think and with the breakdown you provided, that means most of the urban park rangers are funded by the council's temporary one-shot funding. Mm-hmm. So of 89, 50 of them are coming from us every year. Sorry, putting that money into the council, and that to me is just shocking. To knowing the role that they play, knowing that every year. And I know these workers I mentioned, and I hear from them, but that most of their core of rangers is funded by the council's temporary line because City Hall has not devoted the attention or the resources to actually fund their positions and support these workers. I know everyone in the council, we are so grateful for the work that they do, but it's truly outrageous that is the case. Again, our urban park rangers, if we want to talk about public safety, play such a crucial role, keeping our parks safe in their own way, keeping our natural habitats and our wildlife safe. It really blows my mind. I want to turn over now for second round of questions to Councilmember Brewer. And then
I do want to thank Tricia Simora and certainly Steve Simon from Manhattan. I forgot to do that. But also on this tree issue, what would be the price that could cut the time frame in half? In other words, it's the staff that the chair talked about, plus the cost of, $3,110 for each tree. What would be the amount to cut the time in half? So in other words, you'd have more
So
staff.
there isn't as long of a time period.
4 years. It'd be 4 years to get the entire
I don't know
city.
that we have that analysis right now, but we can certainly look at it, council member. Do just want to note that we are planting a record number of street trees, 18,000, as I said in my testimony, in a year. And there are so many factors with how many we can get in the ground. It's number of contractors, it's the availability of the trees, all of that. So we're always looking to spread our street tree planting as equitably as possible in order to reduce that. I don't have the exact number of what the dollar value would be to reduce that time frame, but something we can take a look at it.
It's not really a funding issue per se. There are a lot of other considerations, though, in terms of the market.
It's making people so upset, this notion of 9, 10 years. It's getting people, I hope that the constituents are not listening. Street trees are like friends. and they're not, they're going to be so obsessed. I was wondering if we could get a number. I can't believe that it's not possible to speed up the process. So money helps. Obviously, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't help completely, but staffing and money would help, I would assume.
We'll happy to look into that further. I mean, yeah, for sure.
To give us a number for cutting the process time-wise in half.
Timeline? Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm coming back again. You know I love parks, right? With increasing awareness of the needs of children with autism and other sensory sensitivities, how is the Parks Department ensuring that new playground designs incorporate sensory-friendly elements? Are we making it a priority to create playgrounds that are not only inclusive, but also provide a safe and engaging environment for children with different abilities, including those with sensory processing challenges?
Absolutely, Councilmember, and thank you for the question. And our Capital Division has done an incredible job ensuring not only ADA accessibility, but really being thoughtful about all kinds of different disabled children. And so we have incorporated in our designs extensive, as part of our renovations, extensive sensory elements so that kids with autism, kids across the spectrum will feel comfortable. All of our new playground designs, if you see them, incorporate and are thoughtful about accessibility, about how we can make them as welcoming and, as you said, not only safe for kids, but also as welcoming for differently abled children as well.
Yes, because, you know, as being a nurse, hearing the parents ask me all that, because they say, how could we bring our children to the park and our children have autism, they're not responding the same way as other children. While we're on that playground, thank you for the oval in Marine Park. It's completed. Oh, thank you, God.
Good.
But now the playground. Am I going to have the sensory things addressing the children that have the challenges needs in there? When we're going to have it?
I can get back to you on the when, because I don't have that specifically. But as you know, we work so hard. The first thing that we do in any capital project is get input from the community. And so we're always going to be responding to, if people say that their primary, objective, their primary thing that they want is to have, play equipment for differently abled children, that's what we're going to do. We're always looking to be responsive to the needs of the community.
Yeah, because the parents are killing me because the park, they've been looking at it and it's been years sitting there. And now we have the oval. They want for me to give them the date when council member, we're going to have that playground back.
Yes, absolutely.
So
understandable. Yes, we can get back to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair, again for my second round. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you both for your questions. All right, we've gotten through a number of topics, and there was a lot of ground that we covered. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Commissioner, for your leadership, for your testimony. Look forward to our continued work together to care for our parks and to ensure that we get the budget and resources that we need. We are now going to turn it over to, unless you want to say any closing words, Commissioner, or you're...
No, just thank you. We so appreciate the support of the council and the advocacy for our parks and open spaces.
Absolutely. All right, we are now going to turn it over for our public testimony. We appreciate your patience getting through all the different topics and questions we had. I'm going to read a brief statement at the beginning. At the beginning of I now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a formal government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to Sergeant at Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant at Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic, which is the Parks budget for fiscal year 2026. And I just ask members of the public to observe that time limit, as we do have a number of people to get to as far as testimony. If you have a written statement or additional written testimony you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of that testimony to the Sergeant at Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Within 72 hours of this hearing, audio and video recordings will not be accepted. And we'll now call up the first panel. Sergeant, we may need one more chair, Sergeant, for the table. We're going to call 5 at a time. Will Hiron, Max Barton, Isaac Kirk Davidoff, Dilcy Ben, and Joe Pulio. Please come on up. We can start from my left to right. And because it's a long hearing, I'm going to stand, but I'm listening just the same. So go ahead.
Hi. Good. My name is Max Barton. I'm a union representative from Laborers Local 1010, Pavers and Road Builders. Union representation gives a worker a voice, and it's a powerful thing to have a voice. Members of the City Council, Chair Krishnan, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have a voice today. My union is proud to advocate alongside Play Fair Coalition for the full restoration of New York City parks alongside the for year 26 budget, and I'm excited to use the Vital Parks tool and testimony for the first time today. A tool used to empower New Yorkers with data, which then they use to empower their elected officials to make budget decisions. And well over 75% of our community boards parks fall below the Vital Parks high condition scores, as once clean, safe, and green and resilient parks have been replaced by budget cuts that we've been talking about today. And how do we solve this problem? We've been talking about it: play fair, restore our budget, hire back our workers. I would also like to use my opportunity to voice my raise concerns about the use of the budget that we both currently have and will going forward. I'm going to talk about the felony parks contractors, not Dragonetti that we usually talk about. Our union's been raising concerns about Dragonetti for years. Nicholas and Vito, who pled guilty 2022 to insurance fraud and offering a false instrument for filing in the second degree. I'm going to talk about Griffin's Landscaping and Glenn Griffin today in 2025. March 13th, 2025, 1 week ago, last Thursday, Glenn Griffin motion to withdraw guilty plea was denied. His sentencing for 1 count conspiracy to commit bribery and 1 count wire fraud will take place on April 22nd in 33 days. Glenn Griffin is set to receive up to 10 years in federal prison and over $20 million in capital projects. 9 years to plant your tree. Will he be in prison when he does that for you? This is real and relatable. Is it solvable? Proper contractor vetting and public oversight in the city's procurement process will ensure accountability and eliminate waste and inefficiency. Procurement should be better. Contractors awaiting federal sentencing and receiving awards is not an efficient use of resources. With greater transparency, oversight, and accountability, you better believe this issue can be solved. 10 seconds. Thank you for your time and consideration to improve our parks budget, to create a budget that all New Yorkers can feel proud of.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Dilsey?
Good afternoon, Chair Cushman and fellow members of the City Council and Parks and Recreation Committee. My name is Dilsey Ben. I'm the president of Local 1505, representing close to more than 1,000 city park workers, also known as CPWs, as well as known as seasonal workers who primarily work in New York City Parks and Recreation Department, all 5 boroughs, performing cleanup and conducting maintenance in all city parks. We are happy to see that the mayor included a second shift expansion in his preliminary budget, which includes an additional $4.6 million for the fiscal year 25 and the $12.6 million in fiscal year 26 and out years. This funding increase will add 230 additional second shift workers, bringing the total of second shift workers to 470. These new workers will cover an additional 100 hotspots in city parks. As you're aware, These are much needed positions, especially in the summer when there's a lot of activity in the parks, such as families celebrating, live events, concerts in parks. The parks need to be kept clean so thousands of New Yorkers as well as visitors can enjoy these beautiful open spaces. These positions are a pipeline to employment and helping New Yorkers get job skills to get back on their feet. I heard that the other day a single mother living in New York City housing went from being a park worker to becoming a CPW. That's only one of the many stories that you haven't been yet told. I am glad to hear that the administration had fully heard us and included the much needed funding into the budget for second shift, but there's more work to be done. I'm here today to support my fellow union brothers and sisters who work in other park titles that need restoration and baselining of funds. Some of these positions include baselining $4.1 million for 50 urban park ranger positions to manage wildlife and ensure engaging additional experience. And I will take any questions if you have anything you need to ask.
Well, first I want to say,
thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, for your work, for your membership's work too. One question I have is, as a union leader as well, representing so many different parks workers in our system, when we don't, it's my view, and I think a lot of my colleagues would agree, that investing in our parks budget, as I've said, is investing in our workers. And the cuts that you all face directly impacts workers on the front lines. Can you describe what you hear from also your coworkers too about their concerns about when the parks budget gets cut? What is the impact? What does that have on the workforce?
Well, I've been in parks 30.2 years, and I got to give a lot of my members credit because we don't get paid a lot of money to do what we do, but we do it every day, and we do it with a lack of equipment, I have 12 homeless people. We have homeless people that work for the city of New York. It's a lot of things that, and I'm quite sure everybody know how cold it was this winter. There's no part of parks that's inside. We work outside. This has been a brutal winter for us, where we had a shortage of equipment. And like I said to you, to be homeless at that time and have people that don't have food to eat, it's insane. But they do it every day. This is what they come back to. But I have a lot of seasonals that come back every year that have to leave. And these jobs could help them have some kind of stability in their lives. All right, so we could have seasonals that come back. We could have other people that have families that don't have permanent jobs. And like I said to you, the main thing is taking care of all the ground that we have to cover. It's a lot of ground. And there's no way for us to cover it with the amount of people that we have to work. And I appreciate all the help that we're getting from the City Council, especially from you, the Pay Fair Coalition, and that come out for us every year. Like I say, Mark Levine, and everybody that comes out to try to help us, but it's just not enough.
So in your testimony, in your view, you don't feel that the resources that the Parks Department currently has are enough to support the workers doing the work every single day out there?
Not enough at all. Not enough at all. We need as much as we can get. And like I said, if they give us the 1%, that'll put us to where we used to be. Okay, we've never been over. We've always been behind, and every year we're still behind. The people that we have now are people that they're trying to get back from what we had years ago. All right, but they always want us to do more with less. I always say that, but like I said, my people do this every day. But you have a lot of New Yorkers right now, especially the way prices are rising, food is rising, and don't try to buy no eggs, okay? We need help. Like I said, and it would help them have some type of stability. And like I said, a lot of people came off of welfare. To pop worker to CPW. Now the CPWs are being trained to be gardeners and pruners. We're trying to advance our members to do more with the help that we have, but we can use as many as we can get.
Well, thank you for your testimony. And thank you for highlighting how important and personal the issue is for so many parks workers.
And thank you for your help always.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you.
You too. Will?
Good afternoon, everyone. Chair Krishna, thank you so much. Also to the members of the Parks Committee and all to the council members in attendance. My name is Will Hiron, and I'm here on behalf of Laborers Local 1010 La Yuna. And I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today. Laborers Local 1010 is proud to advocate alongside our community members for full restoration of NYC parks in the FY26 budget. With one of the smallest city agency budgets, every dollar allocated to our parks matter. However, we also want to raise serious concerns about the Parks Department procurement policies that allow unscrupulous contractors to bid and win contracts. And thank you, Chair Krishnan, for uplifting that to the Parks Commissioner. We mentioned Griffin Landscaping Corporation that has a history of being awarded NYC Parks projects, specifically over $20 million, as also the Chair mentioned, in tree planting contracts in the past 3 years, despite the company owner, Glenn Griffin, being charged in 2022 with 7 counts of fraud, bribery, and bid rigging in federal courts. In 2025, Griffin's Landscaping will be awarded 2 tree planting projects that are currently pending contract registration. And we've also included the original indictment in the folders that we've distributed. But this is not the first time that we've seen NYC Park engage with fraudulent contractors. In 2023, the Parks Department awarded Dragonetti Brothers with $40 million in tree service contracts, despite Nicholas and Vito Dragonetti pleading guilty in 2022 to insurance fraud and offering a false instrument for filing in the 2nd degree. And just recently, it was reported that Champion Electric also falsified payroll records in 2016 and committed over $200,000 in wage theft on a sidewalk repair project also contracted to Parks. And these cases highlight a critical failure in the city's procurement process, and taxpayer dollars should not be handed to companies with a track record of fraud and misconduct. These contracts not only waste scarce funding, they undermine the integrity of public projects, they lead to worker exploitation, and they put all of our communities at risk. So the City Council and the Parks Department really must take immediate action to ensure that the public funds are not awarded to criminal contractors, and we look forward to working with you, Chair Krishnan, and to everybody in the City Council to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Thank you for your testimony. One question, do you believe that there would be other contractors? I mean, there's a problem of awarding contractors awarding contracts to problematic contractors. Do you accept the argument that these are the only ones that can do this work, or is there a pool of contractors much broader than the problematic ones that the Parks Department is using right now?
Absolutely not. We certainly do not accept Parks' argument. As a matter of fact, we have plenty of contractors, responsible contractors who have experience in this work, specifically MWBE contractors. I mean, we have a whole bunch of signatory contractors in our union, I'm sure other unions do as well, that can very easily take on this work, that have the experience and that also have integrity and that also treat their workers right. So we don't accept that argument at all. And again, there's plenty of contractors who bid on these contracts, but they don't get it.
And Councilmember Brewer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I asked the question, I'm sure you heard, is there enough capacity to have a quicker turnaround? In other words, maybe half the time frame. And I think the answer from the commissioner was basically there's no capacity, there aren't enough contractors, but I think you're saying something different. If we had the funding and if there was enough staff, I think you're saying that there would be enough contractors to plant in perhaps half the time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the Parks Department is coming up with that statement, but I mean, we have plenty of contractors, and again, MWBE contractors especially, that are able to do this work, that have the capacity, that have the experience, but they're just not given the opportunity. So we don't accept that argument from the Parks Department either.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Joe?
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know, my name is Joe Pulio. I am the president of Local 93. I represent the Urban Park Rangers, the PEP officers, the Associate Park Service workers, and all the city seasonal aides in parks. Again, thank you, Chair, for your advocacy, and members for all your help. As you already know, we're at a crisis situation when it comes to both cleanliness and safety in our parks. It is probably the all-time worst. And what I find most frustrating is it's not coming from enemies. This is coming from friends. These are people that were elected and told us they were going to do things for us, like the 1%. Not only did we not get the 1%, but we got a reduction in workforce, just the exact opposite of what we were promised. So this, from my standpoint, is frustrating, and to me, it's outrageous how we could put our people out there in harm's way. Not only the park patrons, but also our PEP officers. With a reduced force, that means that they are scattered thin. And a lot of times these people have to do these patrols by themselves, and they have to encounter such people in parks that are less than friendly. You know, these are people that at times have to be arrested. We need more PEP officers, right? We need to double the force that's out there just to scratch the surface. And what a lot of people don't realize is that during the summer months, most of the people that are in the parks are no longer there because of the pools and beaches. They're redeployed into these areas, so that leaves the parks wide open with nobody there. For the first time in recent times, last year, I'm watching park crimes on national news. We're talking about Nightline, you know. These are during broad daylight, vicious crimes like rape, robbery happening in our parks during the daytime. And to me, for that not to catch somebody's attention is really a crisis.
And Joe, first, thank you to you and your workers for all the
Thank
work
you,
you do in
appreciate
our parks. So 18 park rangers per borough.
That's yeah. I mean, that says it all. And thanks to you and City Council. And let's not forget, you know, this is serious because at one point in time they were all laid off. And who would want to take on a civil service job without security? Imagine being told that you are hired, but you might not have a job in a year from now. Who would take on the burden of taking that role, knowing that they may not have a job? You know, and not just them. Our city, like my colleague Delcy said, we also represent city seasonal aides, which are like CPWs but just hired for the summer. Their headcount has been reduced dramatically. These are the people that clean alongside with Delcy's people, clean the parks, the beaches, the pools, right? There's been a significant reduction in their numbers. And there's still a hiring freeze. Our associate park service workers cannot be hired because there's also restraints in that matter too as well. So I don't still understand till today why we are at a state of point where we are, where we cannot get people into these positions and let them do what is needed for the city of New York.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you all to this panel for your testimony and for your work.
Thank you.
Our next panel we'll call up are all Highline Fellows. Bismarck Gani, Joshia Vega, Anian Cameron, Evander Thomas Chet, and Michelle Johnson.
Hi, good afternoon, chairs of the committee. My name is Bismarck Gani, and I'm representing myself as part of the Online Fellows program. I go to Crestline High School, and I live in Thailand. Oh, my bad. Sorry. I'll restart. Good afternoon, chairs of the committee. My name is Bismarck Gani, and I'm representing myself as part of the Highline Fellows program. I go to Quest to Learn High School, and I live in Manhattan in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood. And I know there's a lot of going on in our city. Before our city to function well, we needed to fund it holistically. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General declared loneliness as a public health crisis. Then in 2024, a Harvard survey found that 21% of adults experience loneliness. 24% among 18 to 29-year-olds, and 29% of those 30 to 44 as the loneliest group. Some of the leading causes show huge numbers of involvement, with 73% blaming technology and 66% blaming that they have lacked time with their family. The need for connection is clear, and the solution, I believe, is parks. 3/4 of Americans want more accessible green spaces and community events to bring people together for their families and friends. Providing that, investing in our parks means investing in our community's well-being, which invests in our city as well. Parks aren't just scenery, they're essential for mental health and connection, and investing in them is investing in our city's well-being. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee chairs. My name is Josiah Vega. I'm a resident of the Lower East Side, and I'm here representing the Highline Fellows. Parks are more than just an open space. They are essential to our communities, health, and safety. New York City has a chance to fund parks have been continuously underfunded for many years. As a resident of the Lower East Side, I know how important parks are to our community and public schools. Public schools constantly have to use public spaces because not all schools have the funding or space to have their own playground. More funding allocated to the parks budget will ensure we keep parks safe, clean, and accessible for kids in the community. Parks provide a peaceful environment that supports mental well-being, offering people a place to relax and enjoy ourselves. Green spaces also provide better air quality and reduce pollution, making our city healthier for everyone. Investing in parks is not just about investing in its beauty, it's about making our city healthier, safer, and stronger for everyone. Underfunding parks has led to people losing their jobs, less maintenance on parks, and has even impacted the quality and safety of green spaces. Investing in our parks is investing in the well-being of New Yorkers. I urge the committee to increase the parks budget for parks to ensure we can keep our parks safe, clean, and accessible for everyone. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Hello, committee chair and members of the committee. My name is Anaya Nicole Cameron. I currently attend Bard High School Early College, and I am also a fellow of the High Line. I want to say thank you for the chair and the members of the committee for convening this hearing. Parks have been the center of culture cultivation for years, but for some reason we have continued to deprioritize parks in the city budget. Each year we have the opportunity to create a new era for parks where they are well funded, cared for, and overall continue to serve as a backdrop for so many historical and cultural moments. They are one of the most important common goods in our city, and we should fund them as such. During the summers, one can walk around and certainly find at least one picnic or barbecue happening inside of a park. If it wasn't for the paid safety workers keeping the trouble away and the paid workers keeping it clean, these moments of peace and happiness would not have been able to occur. A cut in the budget of parks is a cut in the cleanliness and safety in parks. This would eventually lead to the diminishment of New York City's culture. As the years go by, we have seen an increase in the conversation surrounding mental health and climate change, and I believe that the attention towards green spaces should follow. According to the National Library of Medicine, there has been a direct correlation between green spaces in neighborhoods and the decrease of an individual's mental distress, anxiety, and more. Therefore, I urge you to increase the budget of parks with the mental health and safety of your New Yorkers in mind. Thank you for your time.
Hello, committee chairs and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity for us to speak today. My name is Nashel Johnson, and I am a Highline Fellow. Throughout the years, the parks has been put to the side for too long. The parks are supposed to be an open space to many, either after school, during free time, to let go, no matter what age, and yet it is continuously being deprioritized. Without the full restoration of parks funding, we get a park that provides less than the basic necessities. With less funding, we get a park that is less safe but gets more trash and risk. With less funding, we get a higher percentage of kids not enjoying the wonders of outside. With less funding, parents don't feel that their child is safe even when it's made for them. But with more funding, that could be changed. One step, one funding cycle at a time, people will see a park that truly grows their community, where kids blossom and bloom. The lack of attention, infrastructure, and improvement for parks only cause less security for our communities. We need a place to be kids and socialize with others our age. And if the parks, the place that formed the joy and innocence of many, looks as if it was abandoned, neglected, and isolated, is simply not inviting or safe to anyone. That is why we need to change it. If we get the park section of the city budget to something better, there will be a future where kids and many others are more open to the world. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, committee chairs. I'm Evander Tomashite. I'm a civic engagement fellow at the High Line. Recent budget cuts to the city's parks have left them woefully underfunded. Although more funding will be allocated to the parks for 2026, years of budget cuts, especially ones made during COVID, make this additional funding insufficient. With sufficient funding, parks contribute invaluably to their communities. They improve the mental and physical health of people living near them, provide jobs to people all over the city, and increase tourism. Without funding, parks deteriorate and stop providing the same utility. They cannot afford to fix the cracks in the pavement that discourage runners, or hire employees and create jobs, or maintain the attractive parks that draw in tourists and are pleasant places for New Yorkers to spend their time. If you were to restore the parks budget, they would be able to provide all these services and more to our communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much to all of you for your testimony, for how much you care. You all did an amazing job, and just appreciate, and for all of you in school too, being so dedicated to our parks, to making sure that they have the resources they need, and really, besides all you're doing in school, showing by action too how you can get involved in your community and how you can care for our parks. So thank you all so much. You give us a lot of hope for the future too.
I love the T-shirts, the sweatshirts. They're
That's
beautiful.
right. It's a good touch. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, for our next panel, Adam Ganzer, Deborah Kirshner, Tamar Renaud, and Alia Sumru.
Testing. Thank you, Chairperson Krishnan and the members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Adam Ganzer. I'm the Executive Director of New Yorkers for Parks. We are the co-founders of the Playfair for Parks Coalition and the only independent not-for-profit focusing solely on New York City's parks. I want to make something very clear. The preliminary budget has not restored the Parks Department, and we've been hearing a lot about that today, but the administration is saying otherwise. Parks has not been restored. Over the last 3+ years, the agency's budget has been cut repeatedly. Since fiscal year 23, lost more than 700 positions. While libraries and culturals have had their budgets restored, Parks did not in June. The mayor's preliminary budget for the next fiscal year does not address these lost positions, leaves the agency short-staffed and unable to do the work that New Yorkers and our Parks Department depend on. A few examples: the agency is critically low on parks enforcement patrol officers, which keep our parks safe for families and communities. The Forestry and Natural Areas divisions have been gutted, notable given that we've had more than 400 brush fires in our city's parks last summer. 50 of the agency's small team of urban rangers are on one-shots, as we discussed. Those positions are going to expire at the end of the fiscal year. Administrative staff, tradespeople, programming staff, project managers, the list goes on. You heard a lot about operational efficiency from the Parks Department itself. I think that's a euphemism for doing whatever they can with the little that they have. How does this impact New Yorkers? They're visiting parks and playgrounds that are less safe and poorly maintained. They're frustrated because bathrooms are closed. There are less parks programming. Parks repairs are taking longer. New Yorkers for Parks and the Playfair for Parks Coalition are demanding $79.8 million in fiscal year 26 to restore these essential positions. This is a public safety and a quality of life issue. Speaker Adams recognized as much when she called for full restoration of parks during her State of the City. We thank her and we thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Krishnan and Councilmember Brewer and the full committee for having us here today. I'm Deborah Kirshner. I'm Vice President of External Relations at Prospect Park Alliance, the nonprofit organization that operates Prospect Park in partnership with the city. I am also on the Advocacy Committee of Parks and Open Space Partners, a citywide network of more than 50 nonprofit organizations dedicated to stewarding and programming New York City's green and open spaces. Together, we have a shared vision of an equitable and resilient park system for all New Yorkers. I would like to thank you for holding today's budget hearing and giving members of the open space community a chance to share our perspective on how budget cuts impact our work and the public at large. I am here today to support the efforts of the Playfair campaign to restore cuts to the parks budget, one of the only agencies not to see restoration of cuts made in the previous fiscal year, and to prioritize funding that recognizes how our parks and open spaces are critical infrastructure for all New Yorkers. This includes an additional $65 million investment to strengthen our park system and restore 795 lost positions. These roles are critical to ensuring that our parks remain clean, safe, and welcoming spaces for our communities. We also are urging the city to baseline this funding to prevent the yearly budget cuts that undermine our park system. Prospect Park is truly a public-private partnership. We rely on the city to help with the day-to-day trash pickup and facility maintenance that keeps the park clean and safe. This essential service is core to making Prospect Park a welcoming and accessible space for the diverse communities of Brooklyn. Since the pandemic, visitorship to our parks has increased significantly. In Prospect Park, we have seen a record number of visitors throughout the year, which has created significant wear and tear. At the same time, the city has not kept up with this record use in its funding of parks in the city budget. Now is a time where we need more, not less funding for our parks.
Thank you, Chairperson Krishnan, and members of the committee. I'm Tamar Renaud, the New York State Director of Trust for Public Land, a nonprofit dedicated to ensuring that everyone has access to the benefits and joys of the outdoors. Parks, as you have heard many times today, make cities healthier, more livable, less lonely, and economically stronger. Our 2022 report found New York City parks saved the city $1 billion in healthcare costs and $2 billion in stormwater management, while significantly boosting tax revenue. And as you have heard, they should be employing 700 more staff if only the city invested properly. In partnership with the Department of Environmental Protection and many of you council members, the Trust for Public Land has transformed over 230 playgrounds in all 5 boroughs. Once barren asphalt, now vibrant, green, shade-producing, and storm-absorbing. These spaces are open to the community members after school hours and on the weekends. Please note that we still need funding to keep those 45 of the newest playgrounds open to the community. We're also working with EDC and New York City Parks to convert a 3.5-mile abandoned rail known as the Queensway, a much-needed park and trail connecting 6 communities in Queens. Despite the clear benefits of parks, New York City's park system remains underfunded and understaffed, with thousands fewer workers than decades ago. As a result, New York's national park ranking, called the Park Score, has dropped from 7th. New York City has dropped from 7th out of 100 to 12th last year, while other cities continue to invest more in their parks. As part of the Playfair Coalition, we urge the city to restore those budget cuts and fully fund our parks. Thank you.
Thank you. Alia?
Good afternoon. My name is Alia Sumro, and I'm the Deputy Director for New York City Policy at the New York League of Conservation Voters. Thank you, Chair Krishnan, and members of the Committee on Parks and Rec for the opportunity to testify today. Despite the fact that Mayor Adams committed to funding parks at 1% of the city budget 3 years ago, he's basically done the opposite. Our city's Parks Department was the only agency that did not receive its full budget restorations last year. On top of this, the mayor's preliminary budget once again under-resources the staff and stewards that maintain our city's parks. This lack of investment in our city's park system directly contradicts the mayor's campaign pledge and also contradicts all the climate goals outlined in the administration's Plan NYC, Getting Sustainability Done. That's why we stand with council members and fellow advocates and parks workers calling for $79.7 million to restore and strengthen the city's parks workforce, and programs. This, to be clear, is not enough, but this is what we're asking for at the bare minimum. New York City Parks has lost almost 800 critical positions due to budget cuts and attrition, and the city's parks workforce is operating at a historic low. While we appreciate that the mayor's preliminary plan included additional funding for second shift workers to cover more parks hotspots, fully restoring these lost DPR positions will create stable, good paying union jobs. So as members of Playfair and Forest for All NYC coalitions, NYLCV urges the city to restore the almost $80 million to DPR, commit $1 million in funding for a robust multi-agency planning process for local law 148, that's the city's urban forest plan, and I outline more in my written testimony. But I just want to emphasize that the climate crisis is here. We get air quality emergencies a lot. Extreme heat waves impact the most vulnerable residents of our city. We have to invest in our parks workers. It's here. We're waiting for the mayor to make good on his campaign pledge. We really appreciate the council and the Speaker Adams' support, and we look forward to working with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Just one question for you all, too. I mean, you all do some of the leading work around green space and green space advocacy in our city. You talked a bit about the impact these cuts have had over building on each other over the last few years, too. But I would also say, compared to other cities around the country, too, how do we compare in terms of the investments that we make in our parks and workers?
So as I mentioned, we're coming down in the ranking. We used to be one of the top 10. We're now 12th. Our report is coming out next year. We'll see how we fared. Other cities are investing more. They're increasing their acreage and they're maintaining their parks. They also have amenities in their parks, like bathrooms, much discussed. So the issue is really like the funding for the care taking of the parks is increasing in other cities. And you see in DC, there's been a huge growth. In Minnesota, also in Minneapolis, there's been a huge growth in investment in parks, and so their parks are improving, and that is improving the outcomes for the residents in those cities.
And my last question also is just, can you talk about, any of you, on the practical impact of funding long-term positions for parks workers and these temporary one-shot funding streams that we keep fighting for? What impact does that have on park services? Is that a way that we should be budgeting and running a parks department?
I think what you've seen, since the days when the Parks Department had fully baseline staff is a loss of institutional knowledge, which might be an overused expression, but we're relying on seasonal workers, many of whom try to come back every year, but they're having to rehire these workers every year, and you're not building a baseline workforce to build institutional knowledge, to build for the future of the agency and for its assets. And you referred previously to the Ranger program. The Ranger program has been around for 30 years. Many of the last commissioners came out of that Ranger program. And now having the vast majority of those positions being reliant on one-shot funding every year, you really can't build out what has been an exceptionally important and productive program for building professionals within the agency. So this is happening at every level of the Parks Department. Reliance on seasonal workers really defeats the overall goals of building institutional knowledge. Please.
I can add one thing from Prospect Park. I think with the one-shot funding too, it really doesn't help park managers plan for their season. The way the budget lines up, where you don't have a budget resolved until July 1st, the busy season starts by May 31st. We don't know how many turf crew workers we're going to have. We don't know how many parks maintenance. So I know it's really hard for park managers to be able to plan for the high season when they don't even know how many what their head count is going to be.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Our next panel is Roxanne Delgado, Lynn Kelly, Emily Walker, and Victoria Dearborn. All right, you can begin.
Afternoon, Chair. Thank you for identifying all the needs and problems within the Parks Department. I really think you have a full understanding of what's needed, so I won't repeat what you have said. But I'm the Friends of Pelham Parkway, founded over 7 years ago to address needs for Pelham Parkway Greenway in the Bronx. And mind you, our group is not funded, nor do we work very closely with Parks Department for many issues why. One thing I would say is that for democracy's sake, I recall over 3 years ago, Mayor Adams made a promise to fund the DPR agency 1%. That was one of the factors why I voted for him despite my concerns. And I think this is his last opportunity to keep his word and leave a legacy that he's a person of his word. Because it undermines democracy when we have candidates making promises that they have no intention of keeping. So if our mayor is listening, I hope he understands if he's a man of his word or a person of his word. Secondly, regarding trash cans at Pelham Parkway, the number of trash cans they remove from our parkway is unbelievable. And unfortunately, we have spent 7 years educating and encouraging our community to use trash bins. And now they undermine our efforts by removing most of the trash bins. And now that the weather's nicer, unfortunately, where trash cans, there is now trash accumulating there. Secondly, barbecuing. The Greenway does not permit barbecuing. Unfortunately, due to lack of enforcement, barbecue happens. So Parks says, you're a Greenway, so we don't have to provide you with parks enforcement, but yet at the same time, you're allowing barbecuing. So it's a double-edged sword where we're not getting the maintenance and enforcement that we need because we're a Greenway, but yet, despite that fact, the Greenway is being used as a full-scale park. So I ask Parks, make up your mind. Allow barbecue and provide us with the maintenance and the enforcement, or enforce the current rules where you don't need the maintenance where you would have in a full-scale park. Because when people barbecue and they stay there all day drinking, eating, unfortunately, there is people defecating in the parkway. And to make this short, I really would like to make one big point. Sorry, since I came up, sorry, Chair. Wanted to mention something very important. The trees. You're right. I did do one request. They said it takes over a year to prune it, but what they did was they removed the branch maintenance, and now there's a big hole in the tree. So instead of pruning the tree, they just pulled the branch out, and there's a big gap, a hole. And the lack of care, if you look at their website, the lack of care for the trees in Pelham Park is C-, and we're a very marginalized, high-temperature community where we need our trees, and our aging trees are being neglected, so they're intentionally being removed, and no new trees are being planted. If they're planted, it's ornamental, doesn't provide anything for urban wildlife, doesn't provide anything for us or for all the car emissions throughout the Greenway. And I do complain, you could Google Friends of Pelham Park, where we do get retaliation from Parks Agency, where we actually have to lose our fiscal sponsor and lose our funding because we made complaints about parks. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Lynn? Mike, yep.
I should know this, right? Hi, Council Member. I'm Lynn Kelly. I'm the Executive Director of New Yorkers for Parks and also a co-chair. I'm sorry, did you hear me? Adam, boy, I'm off. It's been a long day.
Yeah, it's been a long day.
I am the Executive Director of New York Restoration Project, but proudly here as a co-chair of Parks and Open Space Partners and a founder of the Play Fair Coalition. Councilmember, today is the first day of spring. Right? Yay, spring. However, it feels like Groundhog Day to me because I have sat in this chair for the better part of a decade with New Yorkers for Parks, with my colleagues behind me, advocating for a budget that really reflects parks as critical city infrastructure. Listening to the facts from the commissioner, 18 rangers per borough, $3,100 to plant a tree and a wait of 9 years. If I wasn't here in person, I would think I'm watching a bad episode of Parks and Recreation. And here's the thing. This is what happens when you have disinvestment for 40 years in the city's park system. We can change that. I know you believe in that. Our world feels upside down right now. The values that our city holds near and dear are under attack, right? Where do people go when they need a respite? Where do people go when they need to clear their head? They spend time and they commune inside our parks. For me, the safety, the security, and the maintenance of the parks is something I will continue to fight for another decade, but we need your help. Bismarck, the young man from the Highline Leaders, if he doesn't know it, he has my vote for mayor. Yes. And I would ask you, council member, and your colleagues, that when the going gets tough and you're across the budget negotiation table and you're talking about it, think about Bismarck, think about what he said, think about the facts he spoke about mental health, and think about how we have the opportunity to really turn the tide. Thank you. And thank you for listening to my mess ups here at this table.
Emily?
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Emily Walker, and I'm the Senior Manager of External Affairs at the Natural Areas Conservancy. Thank you to the Chair and the members of the committee for the opportunity to speak today. Despite the strong support of the Council last year, NYC Parks lost nearly 80% of the staff lines that care for our 12,000 acres of natural forests, wetlands, and trails. The timing, as it turned out, could not have been worse. Last fall, we experienced a drought that resulted in hundreds of brush fires throughout our forested natural areas citywide. The unprecedented scale of these fires caused a strain on our park staff, conservancy partners, and the FDNY when managing the spread of these dangerous blazes and assessing the damage. We are here today to state in the strongest terms possible that the Mayor's office must restore and baseline $5 million to make permanent 76 staff lines for forest and trails management. These positions would add urgently needed capacity for the Parks Department's Natural Resources Group to ensure that our forested natural areas are better managed and restored, and that our public nature trails are better maintained for safe public access. We urge the City Council to throw their full weight behind this investment in NYC Parks and its natural areas. This is both a watershed and vulnerable moment for our urban forest. Under the new federal administration, it's clear that cities will need to take strong leadership on climate and resiliency issues. There are currently 22 natural area staff whose positions are being covered through federal funding that's currently imperiled, now at risk due to the budget cuts and the grant freezes coming from DC. We are also now working closely with our partners, including the Mayor's Office for Climate and Environmental Justice, on the creation of New York City's first ever urban forest plan. Disappointingly, the level of funding allocated to our forests and the FY26 preliminary budget makes clear that City Hall is not meeting the moment with the urgency and investment it requires. Despite the immeasurable benefits they provide, our forested natural areas are at an ecological tipping point. Our forests contain 5 million of our city's 7 million trees, absorb 70% of our carbon, absorb 22% of our city's stormwater, and provide critical ecosystem services for the thousands of unique flora and fauna that, despite all odds, call New York City home. But they require more on-the-ground management to remain healthy in the long term. This year, the Mayor and the Council have the opportunity to be true climate leaders by investing in our forests. It's not a large investment to make and would result in outsized positive benefits for our urban forest and the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Always a tough act to follow. But good afternoon. My name is Victoria Dearborn. I'm here today representing Tammy Lynn Moges, who is the director of the Nature Conservancy's Cities program in New York. Thank you, Chair Krishnan, for allowing us the opportunity to speak about the need to fund parks, and in particular, the New York City urban forest. I'll be brief today, but have submitted longer written testimony. The Nature Conservancy is the world's largest conservation organization. We have 90,000 members across New York State, 35,000 of whom are in New York City. And we also convene the Forest for All NYC Coalition, which is now a coalition of over 170 organizations, and we are also a proud member of the Playfair Coalition. I'm here today to express support for fully restoring, baselining, and expanding the parks budget, particularly for urban forestry. Tree canopy, vegetation cover, and green space are crucial for the health and safety and livability of New York City. Trees and parks cool neighborhoods, clean air, and improve our quality of life. Our urban forest and its care directly impacts the well-being of New Yorkers. I commend Council as well as the administration for establishing a goal of 30% tree canopy cover citywide to address extreme heat, both through commitments in Plan YC and also codified in Local Law 148 of 2023. Unfortunately, the continued budget cuts critically threatened our urban forest. I'm asking Council and the Mayor to fund baseline the Parks and Recreation forestry staff positions, as well as fund the implementation of the first ever citywide urban forest plan by the Mayor's office, fund updated citywide LiDAR data to monitor the urban forest, and fully fund the 2025 street tree census. Additionally, I call for a full restoration and baselining of the 700 plus other park staff positions and tree programs that were cut in the past few years. Parks workers perform critical services, and they're necessary for the public safety, workforce development, community health and wellness, and climate resilience goals of our city. Thank you again, Committee Chair Krishnan and members of the Parks Committee for considering our request for DPR's urban forest budget. It needs to be fully restored and protected, and I ask that you help us in that fight. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your testimony and for your work every day for our park system.
Thank you.
Our next panel is Tessa Huxley, Karen Horvath, Ali Ryan, and Sally Burns. Let me start.
Hi, my name is Tessa Huxley, and I came here today as a citizen. I'm a volunteer with the Sarah Roosevelt Park in the Lower East Side. But the longer I listened to everybody here, I thought I'd give you a little of my experience, because I have worked in greening, public gardens, public community gardens, public parks since 1975, and we are a broken record. All we do is say there's not enough funding, and we never have had enough funding. In 1989, I was part of a group of every environmental organization in the city of New York. That was a hard thing to do, but one of the things we were advocating for was 1% of the budget. Here we are. It seems a bit much that 50 years after I started my career in greening, we're still asking for 1% of the city budget. So most of all, I say, take off your gloves and let's get serious, because it's really, really bad. As a volunteer, I did, since no one else here is just working as a volunteer, I'm 72, so I retired. It's just so sad to be in my park every day, where I should be doing horticulture, that's what I thought I would do, but really what I'm doing is garbage collection. And it's endless, it never ends. And it's not through the fault of the Parks Department, they just don't have enough people. A couple of weeks ago, I did a major winter cleanup of the area I care for, and it was 3 days before those 15 trash bags were collected. So we are really in trouble, folks. Thank you very much, I know you're trying.
Thanks. Thank you. Hello, my name's Ali Ryan, and I am here. I'm a long-term resident of the East Village, and because of my children, I spend a little part of every day in a New York City park or a playground in Lower Manhattan, and I biked by Sarah D. Roosevelt Park on the way here, and I see the trash as well. I appreciate the City Council Committee on Parks for hosting this meeting every year. This is not my first time. And I also want to commend you, Chairman Krishna, Shekhar Krishna, because I know last year you negotiated the highest percentage for the Parks Department budget that we've seen yet. And I want to commend you for that. But I know you're a parent too, and you're in the parks as much as I am, because our children are close in age. But what I want to share is that I found we talk about the Parks Department being understaffed. When I first started coming to this meeting, I wanted to talk about one thing, but then I realized, no, I need to talk about the workers. And their union jobs. We're asking to help people earn a living, but also to take pride in their communities. And not all parks have a conservancy attached to provide essential funding to ensure that the park is maintained and safe for all. So I'm here today to call for the council members to hold the line and to dedicate 1% of the city budget to parks. Fully fund Green Thumb, which symbolizes protection of the community gardens that enable families to grow food, as well as outdoor community spaces. Year-round staffing, restore the funding for 700 union jobs. I'm gonna just quickly wrap it up. We need more PEP officers. It's not just for public safety, but like in my neighborhood, it's because we have gang-related gun violence and drug dealing. Closing parks at midnight so parks can rest. And then the biggest issue I think that's going to be coming up is pest control, especially dealing with rats, because in like Tompkins Square Park, there are 197 rat burrows right now. And the restaurant sheds are we're going to get new restaurant sheds opening April 1st. So we do need to add more into the budget to deal with rats and pests. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And unfortunately, we got the highest budget ever for parks, and that was supposed to be a starting point to get more. And instead, it's been backsliding since, but we will keep fighting. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Krishnan, and the members of the council who have been deeply committed to our parks and open spaces. My name is Karen Horvat, and I'm president of NYC Tree Pit Services. We're a for-profit social enterprise contractor and a member of the Forest for All NYC Coalition. NYC Tree Pit Services plants street trees. We expand tree beds, we install tree guards, and we perform other services that help our street trees live to their fullest potential. So we've been fighting for years to increase our city's tree canopy coverage. We were very pleased in 2023 with Local Law 148, which codified that goal of 30% canopy coverage equitably and citywide. But I think the thing is, goal setting is really just the very first step. So I'm calling on the council and the mayor to provide the funding so that our urban forest plan has a chance to succeed. We need to get past this issue of persistently underfunding the Parks Department, specifically in the areas of urban forestry. We need forestry staff just to care for the canopy that we have that's existing, which has taken us decades to establish. We need funding for the urban forest plan, including the LIDAR data set so that we can track the change in canopy coverage over time. We need funding for the updated street tree census, which lets us put a monetary value on our urban forest, and it also helps us to more efficiently support our urban forest. And finally, we need restoration of the parks programs and staff, which have been severely cut since 2023 to levels that are far below our international peers. Our street trees are the gateways to our communities. They're a gathering place, a source of pride, silently standing guard over our busy New York lives, but they cannot speak for themselves. I know that the budget must address many important priorities of the city, but what good are many of these things if we don't have clean air and water? Our planet is warming rapidly, and trees are a long-term investment. So please, fight for us, invest now in the future of the city and its people. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Krishnan and committee members. My name is Sally Burns, and I'm the Planning Associate for Union Square Partnership, the nonprofit business improvement district stewarding Union Square. Union Square is a key transit hub, a powerful job center, an extraordinary residential community, a center for culture, for recreation, a home for institutions, a burgeoning tech campus, and a favored shopping destination. However, its park is outdated and its infrastructure needs repair. The Union Square District Vision Plan, USQ Next, sets out to address these issues by transforming the continuous public realm in Union Square and 14th Street, comprising parkland, plazas, and sidewalks. Union Square Park is a critical open space amenity and neighborhood anchor, serving as a green oasis, site for free expression, and venue for demonstrations, performances, and public events, but this intense use has caused the infrastructure beneath it to age and fail. The park was last redesigned in 1985, and its dated design fails to live up to modern expectations for public space. Also, the adjacent 14th Street is home to a critical crosstown busway, but it lacks any permanent streetscape improvements needed for a world-class pedestrian experience. As a down payment on the implementation of the entire vision plan, Union Square Partnership is requesting $10 million to be allocated to the New York City Department of Transportation, including $9 million from New York City Council and $1 million to the Manhattan Borough President for an initial capital commitment towards construction. 14th Street is a key gateway to Union Square Park, and investments in pedestrian forward, accessible streetscapes will further support Union Square Park as a neighborhood amenity, improving the experience for all park users. We are asking the members of the committee to support a city council allocation for this project, which will signal long-term support, help finance its implementation, and sustain future phases. We would like to thank Manhattan Community Board 5 for their letter of support, and council members Rivera, Botcher, Powers, Chair Krishnan, and Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine's staff for taking the time to meet about this important project. Thank you.
Thank you all for your testimony. The next panel, which is Heather Lubov, Merritt Birnbaum, Christina Taylor, and Rosamond Fletcher. Thank you.
Other way. Okay. We lose Christina. Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman Krishnan. I'm Heather Lubov from City Parks Foundation, and I'm here to express my severe dismay over the FY26 budget for parks, which will result in the loss of almost 800 jobs, leaving our parks critically understaffed and struggling to maintain even the most basic services. Particularly at a time when federal funding for the city is highly precarious, I urge the council to restore baseline and renew initiatives within NYC Parks through an allocation of $79.7 million in the FY26 budget. Our parks are not luxuries. They are the backbone of our communities, but they are failing behind even the agency's own standards. More than 60% of parks properties have a vital park score lower than 95, and that's the department's own standard. This is not a minor issue, this is a crisis. At City Parks Foundation, we're doing everything we can to address some of those gaps by providing free programming like Summer Stage and the Puppet Mobile, sports and fitness classes, environmental education programs. We're staffing and funding the New York City Parks and Open Space Partners Coalition, which some people have spoken about, to build the capacity of the nonprofit park stewards that help support the parks and contribute nearly $200 million in private budget relief for the agency. Perhaps most relevant, as half of the public-private partnership collaboration that is Partnerships for Parks, we mobilize more than 32,000 volunteers and offer them training, coaching, event planning, permit support, and other hand-holding services to ensure that those volunteers are able to care for local green spaces each year with the least amount of friction. We also fundraise and administer the New York City Green Fund to distribute more than $2 million in private funds annually to volunteer groups around the city. And while we would encourage volunteerism no matter what, it's essential now when the agency is severely underfunded. 11 Partnerships for Parks team members do this work and are funded directly by the Council's Parks Equity Initiative, so we're asking that this highly cost-effective initiative be expanded to $1 million to ensure that we can continue. The commissioner mentioned the hiring slowdown, but part of that is that there's currently a freeze on the hiring of external candidates. We have lost countless Partnerships for Parks staff recently to other agency departments and vice versa. So it's a merry-go-round of staff moving between programs with absolutely no growth. In practice, this means that our volunteers are continually working with different staff and there's no stability to build relationships. The ban on external hiring must be lifted. And finally, as you've heard, we took on the role of fiscal sponsor for the private funds that are supporting the development of the first ever urban forest plan, and we're conducting the public engagement for the plan's development. And the hope, of course, is that we can use the plan to increase our tree canopy to 30%. But with the loss of all those forestry and natural areas positions, there is no way that the mayor's office can prepare a plan with such lofty goals and keep those cuts in place. The plan is doomed to fail before it's even been published. Restoring the parks workforce and its vital programs is the only way to ensure that every New Yorker has access to clean, safe, and thriving parks. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the work of City Parks Foundation every day, despite the limited resources of the Parks Department. Merritt?
Thank you, Councilmember Krishnan. Thank you for your advocacy and for calling this hearing. My name is Merritt Birnbaum. I'm the president and CEO of Riverside Park Conservancy. We work in partnership with NYC Parks to help care for 400 acres of public parkland spread across 6 miles from West 59th up to the George Washington Bridge. You heard today about our coalition's asks for this budget. We are asking for people. We are asking for parkies. We are not asking for overhead or equipment or even for pay raises. We are just asking that you put back the funding for the jobs that the city funded in the past so that our parks can be clean and green and safe. We want 795 good union jobs back, and we want to baseline them so that we can stop fighting for these jobs every year, and so that these hardworking New Yorkers will know that they are not expendable and that they can support themselves and their families this year and next year and the year after that. I want to share a few real stories from one of the largest public parks in the system, a district that serves millions of New Yorkers. Each year, from Midtown to West Harlem to Washington Heights, our district is fortunate that we have a conservancy that contributes several $million every year towards its maintenance and operations through our agreement with NYC Parks. Our struggles are real, but they are nothing compared to the emergencies faced by smaller parks with even fewer resources. So in each example, you will see a system that is at the breaking point, being propped up by extraordinary workers, advocates, and partners like the Playfair members who are all doing our best to keep our parks alive. And we are all tired, we are all frustrated, and we are all here because we know that this kind of short-sighted budget austerity cannot continue. A Riverside City Parks worker in West Harlem was moved to tears recently, describing what it was like to be the only city worker responsible for snow removal in her section on Sunday morning at 5 a.m. as dozens of staircases and pathways remained to be cleared. And we had Conservancy staff and volunteers there to support her and rally and get the job done. But that doesn't always happen, and it's possible only in a few parks, and in many cases, it's never available. Later that same Sunday, as families were sledding and building snowmen, they tried to access the bathroom at one of our parks. I know I was there at 2:45 in the afternoon, and it was closed. This is what happens. This is what we see every day. People can't get the most basic services because there are not enough workers in our parks. This is what happens when you don't fund the Parks Department. Last summer, all of the New York City Parks Department's mowers in our park failed at the same time. Now, it's not unusual for mowers to stop working, but there were not enough mowers to go around, so the Conservancy had to authorize emergency funding because it would have taken weeks, if not months, for the Parks Department to fix them. These are just 3 examples, one park, of how the city is failing to provide the bare minimum of what it takes to keep the parks clean, green, and safe. So I'll just close with a question. At a time when our city is losing population at the highest rate in decades, at a time when we should be focused on making our city more livable, at a time when we need stable union jobs to support working families, and at a time when our very existence is threatened by environmental degradation and climate change, why are we not providing the bare minimum of funding for our city parks? It's easy. So parks power New York City. It's time to invest in our city's budget by powering our parks.
Thank you so much, Merritt, for your powerful testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Rosamund Fletcher, and I'm Executive Director of the Fort Greene Park Conservancy. Thank you, Chair Krishnan, for this hearing. At 30 acres, Fort Greene Park is neither large nor small, but it is incredibly well used. The park is located in the heart of Fort Greene, and right where everything's expanding in downtown Brooklyn. Just north of the park, over 12,000 residents live in public housing. The density and growth of the area over the last decade has dramatically increased use of the park by people and dogs. We welcome this use, but we have to contend with its impacts, like the erosion of the park's hills, which requires intensive seasonal lawn rotation and restoration, and the overflowing garbage cans, which require numerous day and evening pickups. The park's heavy use demands adequate park staffing. We filled the staffing gap during the pandemic, but our role as a conservancy is not to relieve the city of its responsibility to fund park staff. Our role is to provide complementary services. I want to repeat that. Our role is not to relieve the city of its responsibility to fund park staff. So, as an example of a complementary service, our Green Team program is a paid environmental education and job pathways program for local teens, now in its 3rd year. The majority of participants live next to the park at Whitman, Ingersoll, and Farragut houses. One of our recent graduates shared this with us. Quote, "I just finished my 2nd day of training with the National Park Service. Kayaking on the Jamaica Bay, we went to a small island and watched a massive swarm of horseshoe crabs molting. It was amazing and so rare to see. And that's just my 2nd day of work. I feel so lucky. I don't think I would be here without my work with the Green Team and the Conservancy. It has made such a difference." So Resident Association President of Whitman Houses, Ms. Sharpton, has asked that we expand the program to meet the demand for teen opportunities in the neighborhood. But how can we expand it? How can we expand this 4th cohort when we're being asked to fill the gap on park staffing? So I'm here to say that it's not fair to deprive our young people of programming that has an impact like this. So we need the city to step up and restore the $65 million and the 795 lost staff positions. Parks are vital public infrastructure. Do not make us take funds from the teens, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for all your work. Our next panel is Michael Davis, Constance Lasolde, Herbert Brooks, and Giulietta Fiore. All right. You may begin.
Hello, Chair Krishnan and members of the committee. My name is Michael Davis, and I'm a community garden member at East Harlem, Rodale Community Garden. There's no better time than summer to embrace the magic and beauty of nature. Unfortunately, we gardeners haven't recovered from the recent budget cuts of New York City parks. People come to us with food scraps to be composted, only to be rejected because the program has been suspended. Green spaces are currently underfunded and at risk of displacement. They provide a good experience as opposed to generating profit. Basically, when you hand over a public utility to private investors, they consistently cut costs as much as possible to generate profits. This usually leads to a worse experience for our people. We've seen this in industry after industry, and we've even seen that happen with the threat to the Elizabeth Street Community Garden. Basically, the New York City Housing Authority took over the land in 2012. The plan is to erect residential housing there. What's happened to Elizabeth Street Community Garden should set alarms and shock throughout the community. A lot of people have already commented on my other points, but in conclusion, I just say that Rodale is one of over 550 community gardens across the city. If community gardens were a private business, it would have closed decades ago, but they're not, so we don't have to think like private business. And it's a gamble, but it's worth the risk, so I land my plane.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Chair Krishna, for calling this. I've testified at this hearing a few years in a row now, and I will submit a formal testimony as well. But I kind of just wanted to speak off the cuff since I have this opportunity. I'm here representing the Historic House Trust of New York City. We help preserve and promote 23 historic houses that operate as public house museums. They're located across all 5 boroughs of New York City, from the southernmost tip of Staten Island to the easternmost reaches of Queens and the northernmost reaches of the Bronx, and even under the GW W Bridge, the Little Red Lighthouse. Yeah, I guess I just want to these places mean a lot to a lot of people. We have over 1 million people visiting these houses annually, and that number is growing. Half of those are school children who utilize these places in the 5 boroughs, in their own backyards, to learn about New York City history. All of these places are publicly owned, and they're on public parkland. They're park zoned. We as historic preservationists are playing the long game, and we are not looking to just preserve these historic houses for another 5 years. We're looking to preserve them for 50, 100, 200 years. And when I say that we want these resources to be around for another 200 years, that shouldn't be a radical prospect. We should have the investment now that we need to ensure that something like that is possible. If these historic sites in public parks go away, you're depriving people of something that's really special, and it's one of those resources that you can't find anywhere else in the world, anywhere else, any other city in America. This is really unique to New York City. And it's also not the only, infrastructure that needs to be supported. I love my historic houses. It's a mission that's very close to my heart, but there are a lot of other resources that the Parks Department maintains. Rec centers, handball courts. I know people love pickleball courts. And if those things aren't invested in today through maintenance and staff positions, there's just no way that we'll have a livable city in the future. So I really hope that you all are able to push for additional funding for the Parks Department, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chair Krishnan and the committee. Thank you for staying to the end. My name is Herbert Brooks, and I'm a ropes course facilitator at Alley Pond Park in Queens. It's a seasonal position. I'm also a trail steward for Riverdale Parks, where I live, and a state licensed wilderness guide for the Catskills. I'm still actually waiting to find out whether the budget supports me going back to Alley Pond. So that's where I am right now today. Being in parks, I get to see the inner workings of the park. I got there 3 years ago, and I noticed it's a heavily used location for barbecues, sports, birding, and dog owner communities. Not to mention the ropes course where we engage thousands of children, businesses, and members of the public in the outdoors and challenge them to build community and reach beyond their comfort zone. I also noticed the skeleton crew that we have of M&O workers, maintenance and operations, that has subsisted with 10 workers for the entire 632 acres. We don't have our own PEP officers or rangers, so we have to call in rangers from other parks for animal rescue, unhoused encampments, or other emergencies like last year's forest fires. Sometimes we would have to add cleaning, parks cleaning, or opening bathrooms to our own duties. Aside from daily use, larger projects can be affected by your budget reconsideration. Wetlands replenishment is an ongoing necessity to stave off the devastation of storms such as Sandy, which we still all remember. Continue greenway projects connect our boroughs and with ecologically friendly routes. Parks contribute to lowering the heat index, both in terms of temperature and crime, but only if they are maintained well. So I ask that you help us to not just 1% doesn't seem like a lot, but also if we could just not cut, that would help. Parks are the biggest, most invaluable pieces of real estate in the city. And to close, to quote the Lorax, one of my favorite environmental texts, unless someone cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your work in Alley Pond Park, and we will keep fighting for the budget that you all deserve.
Thank you.
Do we have to cut this back on?
No.
Good afternoon, Chairman Krishnan. My name is Constance Lissold. I have lived in Brooklyn most of over 50 years now, and I have worked on parks issues during that entire time. I am here first and foremost to represent the interest of those people on Eastern Parkway and the Friends of Mount Prospect Park, who are desperately trying to protect that park and prevent any funding for a skateboard park in that small park, which is used for vast numbers of purposes, including Easter egg hunts, where they want to cement over a part of the park. There is one skateboard park already in Community Board 8, where I used to be chair of the Parks and Recreation and Cultural Affairs Committee. And there are no skateboard parks in many other parts of Brooklyn, and we are doing our share. I am founder of the community garden over the Franklin Avenue shuttle, and in that capacity was also chair of the Transportation Committee. And why we founded that garden was so that children from East New York and other neighborhoods who would not be able to get to all the parks of Brooklyn without the shuttle would have a transportation that would take them everywhere to all the gardens. I could go on and on. That area I'm talking about along Eastern Parkway, everybody works together. The Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, Mount Prospect Park, the community garden down the block. And we need you to protect our gardens, not to cement them over, to stop any cementing over, to stop. I started working on this thing over trees and founded the Eastern Parkway Coalition, which saved many trees and led to the landmarking of Eastern Parkway's scenic landmark. So thank you for trying to help, and I only want to say that I am sorry, Chairman, to hear that your neighborhood is being visited by ICE heavily. My in-laws came from Hitler's Berlin, and they were supported emotionally by being able to go to the parks of Brooklyn, Prospect Park and others, while they were waiting to hear what happened to their relatives. Please remember, as I know you do, the immigrants all over the city that still need all these parks. And I'm going to hand you this, which is a scene where a family that looked like an ordinary middle-class family was being divided on the streets. I don't know whether the father was taken off in a fire department ambulance for no good reason. The mother was taken off in a police car, and the two little children were taken off in a separate police car. I don't know whether ICE was involved with this or was strictly the 71st Precinct, and nobody wants to tell anything about why this extraordinary thing happened. Please remember the immigrants and their needs for the gardens. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Now we have a few virtual panelists as well who have been waiting. First up will be Isabel Friedman.
Hi there. Good afternoon, Chair Krishnan and members of the Committee on Parks and Recreation. My name is Isabel Friedman. I'm an environmental health advocate at the Natural Resources Defense Council. NRDC has long advocated for the expansion of the city's tree canopy and the deepened investment in environmental programs. For many years, the city's incredible park system has been significantly underfunded and understaffed, with the city spending a fraction of their budget on parks compared to other major cities. While running for office, Mayor Adams repeatedly pledged that 1% of the budget would go to parks, saying that parks are not a luxury, they're a necessity. Needless to say, this commitment has not been met. Chair Krishnan himself has argued in the past that urban forests are directly connected to public health, housing, and racial and immigrant justice. On top of all the key benefits outlined by others today, Trees mitigate the urban heat island effect by lowering air temperatures. As temperatures continue to rise and heat waves are prolonged, ensuring equitable access to cooling must be a priority. Formerly red light neighborhoods who are already environmentally overburdened have the lowest access to green spaces and experience temperatures an average of 5 degrees hotter than the rest of the city. The proposed budget is insufficient to support the necessary expansion and maintenance of our urban forests, especially given the obligation under Local Law 148 to reach 30% tree canopy cover. In order to achieve its commitment to climate resiliency and community protection, the city needs to provide the Parks Department with sufficient resources for the staff and programs that will execute this. We are calling on the mayor and the city council to dedicate 1% of the FY26 budget to the Parks Department, with a focus on expanding access to green spaces for frontline communities and continued attention to achieve 30% tree canopy cover by 2035. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. My colleague Eric Goldstein and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we have Romke Hugwerts.
You may begin.
Hi. Hope you can hear me. Thanks for this distinguished council for offering me the opportunity to speak today. Thank you, Chair Krishnan. I know that you're a Mets fan, so I apologize in advance for what I'm about to propose. New York is set to host the World Cup in 2026, and yet constituents are constantly challenged to find spaces to play. Of course, New York City has limited space, but I would like to argue that we should reconsider the usage of a few sites that we already have. Soccer is unique in that you can play with just two people. Bring a ball to a pitch and people will come together to play. It's magnetic. Our city is full of soccer fanatics. Soccer pitches are remarkably amenable to other sports like American football, lacrosse, cricket, ultimate frisbee, and various cultural events. Soccer fields are basically giant multi-purpose playgrounds. Now, of course, baseball is a vital, historic American sport, but as our city grows, becomes more international, and critically is hosting the upcoming World Cup, it may be time to reconsider the allocation of our sports fields in our city parks. Let's look at Central Park. It has 25 baseball fields and not one soccer pitch. I would like to propose converting the 6 fields within the Great Lawn to multi-purpose soccer pitches. Keeping 2 ball fields just above the ring. I would also like to propose that half of the ball fields in North Meadows be converted. However, for those, I would suggest urban farms inspired by the efforts of Amber Tam. As for Heckscher ball fields in the South, those are historic and should absolutely be preserved. I am a first-generation American. I've lived here for 16 years, and I love this city's soccer community. I've played in paid leagues, free pickup games, and tournaments across Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn. I've even had the pleasure to play alongside Newcomers Football Club, a crew of players mostly consisting of asylum seekers passing through the shelter system. It's a reminder that public access to soccer is a fantastic way to bring citizens together. Let me close out by mentioning financial opportunities. This proposal would allow the Parks Department to make use of the $20 million budget EDC has allocated for fan events related to the World Cup. Central Park is an ideal location for such events, considering all the tourists that will be there between games. And finally, this would also create opportunities for lucrative sponsorships, potentially offsetting any costs this conversion would accrue. Had he been alive today, I would like to think that Charles B. Stover would have loved this proposal. Thank you for your time and consideration. And lastly, for the record, let's go Mets. If I still have a second, I just want to shout out Hattie Carthen and her tree planting initiatives in the late 60s, the work that she was able to do with Mayor Lindsay. She was able to plant 1,500 trees in a matter of like 2 years or 3 years or something like that. It's a testament to what we can do if we work together with the mayoral's office. It's absolutely possible. The idea that it would take 9 years to plant trees is absolutely ridiculous. I just want to throw that out there as well. Thank you to everybody today.
Thank you for your testimony, and indeed, let's go Mets. Next up, we have Roberto Sosa.
You may begin.
Aló, mi nombre es Roberto Sosa. Yo vivo acá en Sunset Park. Yo tengo más de 500 niños, más de 10 años trabajando con la comunidad aquí en Sunset Park. Siempre he tenido permiso para los niños. Este año no tuve nada, renové los permisos y me negaron los permisos. Yo quería ver si podía abrir más espacio, más campos para los niños, ya que la comunidad en Sunset Park ha crecido mucho. Y quería ver si podía algún día recuperar mis permisos, que he tenido más de 10 años.
Bueno,
Gracias por la oportunidad. Gracias por la oportunidad.
Gracias por su testimonio, Roberto. Next, we have Alejandra Ng.
Hey, I hope you can hear me. Thank you, Chair
Yes.
Krishnan and members of the Parks Committee. My name is Alejandra Ng, and I am the Assistant Director of NYJTL's Community Tennis Programs. I'm speaking because we are seeking $1 million under the Council's Physical Education and Fitness Initiative, which would be our first increase in over 16 years. During the past 16 years, everything has gone up: labor, permits, minimum wage, and we are struggling to maintain the quality of programming that we are used to at our current level of funding. So please, increase funding to NYJTL's community programs is vitally needed. It is our belief that talent is universal, but access and opportunity are not. And that is why we have strived for over 50 years to introduce the sport of tennis to all children. And with the council as our partner, NYJTL has become the largest tennis and education organization in the country. I'm going to kind of just take a little tangent. I'm a product of this organization. I grew up, doing programming in New York City parks, in playgrounds. And I wouldn't be where I am without this organization. I wouldn't be able to help the over 10,000 kids that we bring tennis to annually every year. We're in over, I think, 25 parks across the city, all 5 boroughs, including Staten Island, which is forgotten a lot. The majority of our participants, I think over 70%, are ages 10 and under. And that's we need to be able to combat the obesity crisis, get these kids young, get them active while we still can. Over 75% of the youth that we serve identify as Black, African American, Latino, and or Asian. Over 80% of our families report as being low income based on New York City's area median income. And let's not just think about the younger ones that we serve, but also our older kids. We employ over 100 coaches every year. 50% of these coaches are in high school or college. For a lot of them, we are their first job. And we would just want to be able to continue providing programming the way we are. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And going back to in person, our next witness is Christopher Leon Johnson. Looks like there's one more.
Hello, Chair Shakon Christian. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. I know it's kind of last person, but I'm here to ask for support for the parks. Yeah, the parks need 1%. I know what's going on here is that the speaker, Adrian Adil Adams, is weaponizing this budget to make sure all these park nonprofits support her campaign for mayor. And if they don't, then she won't fund their nonprofits. At the same time, we have to save all these parks in this budget. Eric Adams is out the door. So while Eric Adams is out the door, he needs to do the right thing for all these nonprofits and fund their nonprofits through the executive budget. The speaker needs to be watched by all these nonprofits that serve the parks, because she is going to weaponize this budget to make all these nonprofits support her campaign for mayor. And if they don't support her campaign for mayor, then she won't give them the money that they need to sustain their services. While that happened, guys, all you nonprofits need to call the FBI on Adrian Adil Adams. You need to call the DOI on Adrian Adil Adams. Record all her conversations. Anytime she give you a call, record them. Get a copy of everything that she does, because she's going to use the weaponize the budget with the help of Justin Brandon, aka Fester, to make sure you guys support our campaign for mayor. We need to fund the parks, fund all these nonprofits that support the parks. Save Bushwick Inlet Park, save Bushwick Inlet Park in New York, in Brooklyn, New York, Lincoln Wrestler's District, Lincoln Wrestler. Support to save Bushwick Inlet Park, Lincoln Wrestler. Please do it. At the same time, last 20 seconds, we need to make sure these bike dock stations be inside the parks. I know Marte and Abreu introduced a bill through your committee to put the bike charge lanes in the parks. This need to happen under this budget. We need to put that deliveries to help outside City Hall, protect our deliveries, protect our migrants. But all you nonprofits, If Adrian Adil Adams threaten you guys and gals, call the FBI, go to 26 Federal Plaza and report her to the federal government, and let's get her arrested. Take care.
Thanks for your testimony. We now have Dr. George Sands.
Thank you for your persistence. Oh, is that okay? Thank you for your persistence and perseverance. I want to compliment all the council members and the chairman for having a rigorous review of parks and really asking really good questions. My name is George Sands, and I'm speaking for the Friends of Mount Prospect Park, which is a member of the Forest for All New York City Coalition. And I'm going to go through my testimony, which I did submit. And then I have a comment for just sitting here and watching everything happen over the last few hours. One of the themes clearly is concern about the environment, that New York City is getting hotter. And, you know, as we consider the New York City parks, the future and the protection of green space and the tree canopies, it's very clear that the weather continues to get hotter and that it's an increasing problem for New York. And we've already talked about it today several times about the fire in Prospect Park. That was inconceivable a year ago, right? And so it's happening more and more. So as we all deal with the hotter temperatures, the parks are an important resource for New Yorkers. The green space helps.
Eric Merrill Sands, FaceTime video.
You can't believe this. The green space helps cool the environment and allows New York respite from the heat. Many within the New York City government have talked about keeping things green. Paving over green space and parks for any reason is inconsistent with that vision and puts New Yorkers at greater risk for the heat to come. The proposal to pave historic Mount Prospect Park and Prospect Heights, Brooklyn, will remove an important resource for the neighborhood to survive the heat. Paving is a bad precedent to start in this city. The call for another skateboard facility in Brooklyn is better served by paving a previously paved space. We should keep all the green space we have. It will only get more important with time. How will you all feel in 10 to 15 years as the planet and New York City continues to get hotter and hotter if you support paving Mount Prospect Park? Will you regret it? And then, separate from that testimony which was submitted, it's very clear we've been talking about the trees and the environment, and I think people are all concerned on some level about exactly what we're talking about, the climate and how parks fits into that. And then we're talking about how to manage the finite resources. I only heard one allusion to what parks brings to the city. You think about the number of people that use our parks, tourists who come from outside New York. When you walk into Central Park, almost ever, and there's tons of tourists everywhere, the High Line, Prospect Park, if there's some way to quantify the revenue or how that impacts the city on the plus side, because we're always talking about the cost and everybody's thinking about the parks as a cost, but the parks is a major source of bringing people in. And if you use Prospect Park on the weekends, it's challenging to bike because people are out there like totally not aware of what's happening. Same thing in Central Park, and they're redoing the roadway in Central Park to finally account for the tourists and the bikes and everything. That's because the tourists come and they bring revenue. So if someone can figure out a way for us to quantify that and share that with the executive or whoever that will be in coming years, maybe we can create some of the more positive energy in the parks and make it not a cost, but an important service for those coming to visit us and for the New Yorkers who've lived here for however many years. Thank you for your continued attention, and thank you for allowing me to be the last person to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for closing us out with that very good suggestion, too, that I think is a very helpful idea of a way to quantify the benefits of parks. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, we are at the end here. I want to, if we inadvertently missed anyone who registered to testify today and has yet to be called, please use the Zoom raise hand function if you are testifying remotely, and you will be called in the order that your hand has been raised. If you are testifying in person, please come to the dais. Seeing none, I will now close the hearing. Thank you to the members of the administration and the members of the public who have joined us today. Thank you to the Parks Department, this hearing. Thank you to all our council staff, our sergeants here. We appreciate it all. Thanks very much. This hearing is now closed.